Chapter 824. Lei Xingfeng said, "Let's put some tools and unused items back into the mirror realm. When it's time to move, the workload will be lighter. Let's do the preparations first. When a notice is given, they'll be able to move faster." Weiyang nodded. "We've already experienced a big migration. Everyone knows what they need and what to prepare. So, a phone, you don't have to worry about this. I'll send someone to take care of it." Gucci said, "Let Feng Qinzong take care of it. Qi Meiyun will be his assistant. You two find people to help." Feng Qinzong and Qi Meiyun agreed. Feng Qinzong even asked, "Let's not move for now. But, Feng, once you decide to move, let me know as soon as possible. Otherwise, it'll be easy to make mistakes if we're too busy." Lei Xingfeng smiled. "No problem. Senior brother, you just need to make the arrangements. Once I give a notice, we'll move immediately." Feng Qinzong nodded. "Okay, I'll organize people to go to the base in a bit." Weiyang said, "Okay. During this time, try not to run around. Also, speed up the mining of the remaining ores. Don't think too much. Dig them out as soon as possible. Put the processing and refining work in the mirror realm." Lei Xingfeng knew that they were going to use brute force to dig. They only cared about speed, not quality. Get the ores back first. The entire hidden sect went into action. Lei Xingfeng was free again. He didn't have a specific role. In the hidden sect, he was basically the biggest card. No one dared to ask him to do specific things. Of course, it would be a waste to ask him to do specific things. His role was to lead the hidden sect in the right direction. With him, the hidden sect's development would be assured. This was Lei Xingfeng's true role, the godly sea stabilizer. This was recognized by the entire hidden sect. The entire hidden sect was busy. Lei Xingfeng's courtyard was empty. There was almost no one in the wooden shed. Only Lei Xingfeng was leisurely passing time on the recliner. However, he wasn't doing nothing. He had been studying Lei Yin. Even with his eyes closed, he was thinking about Lei Yin. He had a lot of problems to solve, and they were very complicated. After all, this was a new field. Lei Xingfeng successfully connected to the first Lei Yin. At this point, he began to be cautious. He always believed that good luck once was good enough. Don't put your hopes on luck again. Of time. Only after he figured it out, to connect with the second. 3, 2, to be, to he too. His current task was to understand the principle and figure out how to do it. Although on the surface, he looked very relaxed. During this period of thinking, Lei Xingfeng had been very helpful. Many things began to settle down. With reflection, he digested and absorbed little by little. His understanding of restrictions and seals grew rapidly. Ever since he had tasted the benefits of being proficient in restrictions, Xian Feng had been extremely diligent in his study of restrictions. Other than eating, sleeping, and cultivating, he spent most of his time studying restrictions. Especially after learning that the lightning stamp could automatically create restrictions, he had become obsessed with this kind of study. Adding on the fact that he had learned the space restriction, his understanding of restrictions had reached a new height. The so-called spatial restriction was a type of restriction that could be combined with anything. Once a spatial restriction was comprehended, then one's understanding of restrictions would increase. Once a person was proficient in spatial restrictions, then the use and understanding of restrictions would be completely different. Moreover, with his proficiency in spatial restrictions, Lei Xingfeng could already influence the restrictions in Lei Yin. In addition, he also had Xiao Kong. His Lei Yin was changing every day. Lei Xingfeng hoped to be able to control these changes, and he did control them bit by bit. Some naturally formed restrictions were changing little by little under his influence. They became stronger, more efficient, and more outstanding in some aspects. Lei Xingfeng began to look at the fire seals that he had obtained. Previously, he had obtained a pagoda-shaped 7-layered Lei Yin and a fire seal that looked like a water droplet. He had used the Lei Yin and dismantled it. As for the fire seal, he basically didn't pay much attention to it. As his understanding of restrictions deepened, Lei Xingfeng began to study the fire seal. At the beginning, he only wanted to study the restrictions in the fire seal. However, when he looked at it carefully, he couldn't help but be shocked. This was because this fire seal was completely different from the Lei Yin. The Lei was a pagoda-shaped Lei, but this fire seal was wrapped in layers. Outside one layer of fire seal, another layer of fire seal. What shocked Lei Xingfeng was that this fire seal had 8 layers. This was a Dao Saint expert with 8 true ring bodies. It was a very frightening level. It was even more powerful than the 7-layered Lei. However, Lei Xingfeng knew that the lightning attribute was innately a battle attribute. The same was true for the fire attribute. However, in terms of power, the lightning attribute was slightly stronger than the fire attribute, especially the lightning attribute's speed. It had always surpassed the other attributes. Other than the spatial and light attributes, the lightning attribute was the strongest. These two people had died in the restrictions because their strength was similar. In the end, they were used by the spatial restrictions. They should have killed each other. As a cultivator of the fire attribute, his fire seal and Lei Yin's cultivation methods were different. There were 8 layers of the fire seal. This fire seal couldn't be dismantled. One layer was placed on top of the other. They were closely connected. There were also fire spiritual beings inside. However, Lei Xingfeng realized that these spiritual beings were on the verge of collapse. If it wasn't for the fact that the fire seal had 8 layers and seemed to have an endless supply of energy, these spiritual beings would have been finished. Lei Xingfeng immediately took out energy crystals and sent them into the fire seal. In an instant, the entire fire seal seemed to come to life and started to slowly revolve. Lei Xingfeng only added a few energy crystals. He didn't plan to feed the fire seal until it was full. It was easier to control the fire seal when it was hungry. If he really fed it until it was full, it would be difficult for him to observe it. While the fire seal was absorbing energy, Lei Xingfeng carefully observed the internal revolutions of the fire seal and observed the changes in the restrictions. Cultivators of the fire attribute were the most common attribute in this world. According to Lei Xingfeng's estimation, at least 50% to 60% of the people were of the fire attribute. Of course, there were also a large number of people who were of different attributes. These people could only become low-level cultivators. Once they wanted to cultivate their own fire seal, cultivators of other attributes would basically have no chance. As for people of the thunder attribute, wood attribute, earth attribute, and other attributes, there were relatively fewer people. However, what was interesting was that it was easier for people of these attributes to cultivate to a high level. The fire seal, as a reference, allowed Lei Xingfeng to gain a lot of knowledge and train ideas. This thing was very different from Lei Yin's. It also allowed Lei Xingfeng to guess that there should be a lot of cultivation schools in the outside world. They should have a lot of experience in cultivation and should be much stronger than people like them. The more he understood, the more Lei Xingfeng felt that he was a country bumpkin. After leaving his hometown, the outside world dazzled his eyes. With Lei Xingfeng's character and temper, the more he was lacking, the more he wanted to surpass him. He had always done well in this aspect, which was why he had his current status and strength. Originally, Lei Xingfeng planned to dismantle the fire seal and leave it for the secret sect. However, after studying and learning, he dispelled this idea. This fire seal was very complicated. The difficulty of dismantling it was much greater than what Lei Yin knew. If he forcibly dismantled it, Lei Xingfeng estimated that the probability of it being damaged was at least 70% to 80%. If it was damaged, it would be a pity. Even if it was successfully dismantled, no one in the secret sect would be able to use it. Even if it was given to Wu Yang, it would be useless. No one had the profound knowledge of restrictions like Lei Xingfeng. Without profound knowledge of restrictions, it was almost impossible to use this fire seal. Just consider it as a collectible. Lei Xingfeng could only think of it this way. Sometimes, giving away this kind of treasure might not have a good result. It might even ruin things because of this fire seal. There were 2 types of seals, Lei Yin and the fire seal. In comparison, Lei Xingfeng obtained a lot of observation results that required him to think and deduce for a long time. Lei Xingfeng calmed down and continued to relax in the courtyard. As long as the people in the secret sect came to Lei Xingfeng's courtyard, they would see Lei Xingfeng lying on the chair and taking a nap. Moreover, He would lie down for an entire day. He didn't even return to his room at night and continued to lie down. Gradually, Lei Xingfeng's lying down appearance became a scene in the courtyard. Anyone who came could see it. On this day, Thunderstorm came back. He saw Lei Xingfeng lying on the chair and couldn't help but laugh. "Feng, why are you so lazy recently?" As he spoke, he took out his own recliner and lay down beside Lei Xingfeng. He said, "You don't say. This thing is very comfortable to lie down on." Lei Xingfeng squinted his eyes and said, "It's very comfortable to rest for a while." Thunderstorm laughed. "You seem to have been resting recently." Lei Xingfeng sat up and said, "Ai, do you want me to run around outside all the time?" Thunderstorm waved his hand and said, "Of course not. It's just that I'm not used to seeing you lying at home all the time." "Huh." He was just saying it. If Lei Xingfeng really had to be busy, he would also be heartbroken. Lei Xingfeng said, "Ai, once you succeed in breaking through to the monarch rank, your cultivation method will change. In the future, I will give you technique. You will need to refine another Lei. Thunderstorm was shocked. "Refine another Lei? That's too difficult." Lei Xingfeng sighed and said, "No matter how difficult it is, we still have to refine it. This is related to our future development. When we reach the peak monarch rank, we will have nowhere to go. We can only refine another Lei to greatly increase our strength." Thunderstorm actually refined 2 Lei. After he was heavily injured, the imprint couldn't be used anymore. In the end, he gave it to Lei Xingfeng as an initiation for cultivation. The current Lei was cultivated by him later on. With the help of a natural lightning, he took a risk and refined the second Lei. Later on, with the help of a huge amount of materials and various treasures provided by Lei Xingfeng, this Lei could be considered to have truly grown. It also allowed him to become a peak down monarch. He was just one step away from becoming a beginner monarch. Chapter 825. Thunderstorm asked, "Is there a way to explain it?" Xian Feng spoke. "To us, a peak monarch is basically the limit. There's no way to improve. No matter how much you train, your seal has already reached its peak. There's no way to improve. No matter how well you design your seal, no matter how powerful it is, it's still a single seal. It's extremely difficult to increase its power." Thunderstorm said, "I know this. My Lei has changed a lot. It's completely different from the original design. This is all thanks to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that the seal can be designed like this. Ever since I got the new Lei cultivation method, my cultivation level has improved tremendously. This is something I couldn't have imagined back then. I thought it would be very difficult to improve, but in the end, I still kept improving. I'll listen to you." Lei Xingfeng knew that Ai wasn't conservative. As long as it was reasonable and effective, he would listen to opinions. He especially valued Lei Xingfeng's opinions. Thunderstorm asked, "Does Yao Yao know?" Xian Feng spoke. "Yao Yao has Shaoling. I don't even need to worry about her. As long as I tell her my ideas, she'll help me. So her improvement is something even I can't compare to." Thunderstorm said, "That's different. Yao Yao doesn't like fighting. She just doesn't want to drag us down. That's why she's so hardworking." Gao Yi walked into the yard and saw the 2 people on the deck chairs. He laughed. "So you're slacking off here." "Ha ha." Then, he walked into the wooden shed and took out a deck chair to sleep. Gao Yi stretched and said, "I'm so busy. I'm going crazy for mining. Everyone who has nothing to do has to go mining. There's no one in the mirror realm." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Is it almost done?" Gao Yi said, "The others are fine. The main thing is that the Mingzhe Alliance is in a few mines. We don't dare to excavate on a large scale for fear of alerting the people inside. The speed is much slower." Lei Xingfeng said, "The mines of the Mingzhe Alliance? Is it the mining area occupied by the Mingzhe Alliance?" Gao Yi said, "Isn't that so? It's the few mines that you set up back then. They're all pretty good materials, and they're materials that the middle and lower rank disciples need. We tried our best to dig them out as quietly as possible. But this time, we're leaving, so we hope to dig out more." Lei Xingfeng said, "Tell them to be careful. There are countless tunnels in the mining area. Be careful not to dig the tunnel opened by the Ming-Zhe alliance. That will be fun. Gao Yi said, it's fine. Bai Tianming is in charge of this matter. There shouldn't be any problems. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, we have a lot of high-grade materials, but we don't have enough low-grade materials. Recently, many people have started to cultivate, and they especially need low-grade materials. Thunderstorm said, unfortunately, the Ming-Zhe alliance has a lot of them. I can't get them. Gao Yi said, let's take it slow. There are many places in this world that produce materials. But if we go to the outside world, who knows what will happen? Lei Bao said, if you want to slowly develop in a place, you will slowly sink into depravity, just like how you did in your hometown. Once you lose your drive, the hidden sect will be finished. I think that the Great Migration this time is very effective. Gao Yi shook his head and said, this is because of the relationship with the phone and the use of the mirror world. Without these two, this migration would be a disaster. Look at the other hidden sections. Can you find any traces of them now? They're all wiped out. Lei Xingfeng said, that's hard to say, but our hidden sect has a huge advantage. The key is that we have the mirror world. Without it, it would be difficult to develop. Gao Yi said, yes, this is a safe shelter. No matter how difficult or dangerous it is, there's a place to hide, and then slowly develop. This is completely different. Other hidden sects do not have such conditions. A few more people came one after another. Each of them had a deck chair. Lei Xingfeng's eyebrows twitched. In the evening, someone came back to report that something had happened. He said that something had happened in the Ming-Zhe Alliance's mining area. Because they were in a hurry to dig, many newbies had gone. In the end, they dug carelessly and the tunnel accidentally entered the Ming-Zhe Alliance's mining area. If they were veterans, they could quickly block the tunnel and find the hidden sect's experts to destroy the area. But the newbies didn't know this. They dug along other people's mining area and met the Ming-Zhe Alliance's people. The other party caught a dozen newbies who were all low-level cultivators. Then they followed the clues and caught no less than 200 people who were digging inside. These low-level cultivators couldn't use the mirror world's hidden sections. They had nowhere to run. Only a few people managed to escape. Bai Tianming brought a dozen people back. He rushed to Lei Xingfeng's courtyard, and the situation became lively. Lei Xingfeng sighed secretly. He knew that something was going to happen. He warned them a few times, but they didn't care. Sure enough, something happened in the Ming-Zhe Alliance. A group of people surrounded Bai Tianming in the courtyard. Lei Xingfeng stood up and kept the deck chair. He said, how many people were caught? Is there anyone else in the mining area? Everyone looked at Lei Xingfeng's question. Bai Tianming smiled bitterly. I rushed back to report and let the others hide first. From what I know, about a few hundred people were caught. Bai Tianming's face was pale. He said, what should we do? Lei Xingfeng was very calm. After all, he was strong. He wasn't too afraid. He said, what else can we do? Let's go and save the rest. I'll go and negotiate with the Ming-Zhe Alliance. Thunderstorm said, I'll go with you. Gao Yi said, I'll go too. Lei Xingfeng said, okay, senior brother, try to inform the patriarch and master. I'll go and save them first. Bai Tianming let out a sigh of relief. With Lei Xingfeng, he felt that there wouldn't be a big problem. In the secret sect, Lei Xingfeng's strength was recognized as the strongest. Lei Xingfeng brought Thunderstorm and Gao Yi and appeared in the mining area in an instant. There wasn't even a monarch among the disciples mining in the Ming-Zhe Alliance's mining area. They were all cultivators below the sage level. Only a few leaders were monarchs. For example, Bai Tianming. The others couldn't even return to the mirror realm. They were all chased by the experts of the Ming-Zhe Alliance. When Lei Xingfeng and the other two appeared, they saw a group of people running towards them. Gao Yi took a step forward and shouted, stop! It was a group of disciples from the secret sect. When they saw Lei Xingfeng and the other two, it was as if they saw their family. They rushed over and started talking. Lei Xingfeng felt that it was a mess. He shouted, shut up! Suddenly, there was silence. No one dared to continue talking. Lei Xingfeng said, how many people are there? Where are the others? Who's your leader? A cultivator walked out from the group and said, I'm in charge. There are more than 20 people in our group. There are still many people in the mining area. Lei Xingfeng said, "Why are you running?" Someone said, "Someone is chasing us." "We can't beat them." Lei Xingfeng nodded. "I know. Don't be afraid. I'm here. It'll be fine. Uncle Gao, open the secret door and let them go back. You stay and take us to the mining area." He asked the person in charge to stay. The others immediately returned to the Mirror Realm. Gao Yi was in charge of opening the Mirror Realm's secret door. After a while, everyone left. Only Lei Xingfeng's group and the person in charge were left. Lei Xingfeng said, "Okay, take us there." The cultivator turned around without hesitation and said, "Follow me." The three of them followed closely behind him. After a few forks in the tunnel, they saw another group of people rushing in their direction. "Stop!" Lei Xingfeng saw that they were from the Mingzhe Alliance. He could tell from their clothes. After all, he had joined the Mingzhe Alliance before. He went forward and shouted, "What are you doing?" As he spoke, he took out an identification badge and hung it on his waist. He had the badge of a Restriction Grandmaster. In the Mingzhe Alliance, a Restriction Grandmaster was considered a top person. The group of people surrounded them. The leader was a Dao monarch. He stared at Lei Xingfeng and found that Lei Xingfeng had an identification badge on his waist. He was very familiar with it. He was shocked. "My lord, you are?" Lei Xingfeng was too lazy to speak. He took off the badge and threw it to him. The badge was unique and difficult to forge. In the Mingzhe Alliance, the badge had a unique mark. Therefore, the person didn't find anything wrong with the badge. Actually, there was no problem. This person's status was much higher than his. He was just a Restriction Grandmaster. How could he be here? He had a lot of questions in his heart. He held the badge with both hands and returned it to Lei Xingfeng. He asked, "My lord, what are you doing?" Lei Xingfeng said, "How many people did you catch?" That person said, "We caught about 100 people." Lei Xingfeng said, "Where are they?" The person said they were sent out. "I don't know where they came from. They dug countless tunnels in the mining area. I don't know how much or they stole. This matter has already alerted the headquarters of the Mingzhe Alliance." Lei Xingfeng's heart sank. He said, "I see. Who else is catching people?" The person said, "We have 7 teams in total. These people can't run away." Xian Feng calculated for a bit. This team had around 50 people, most of them true monarchs, with a small number of Dao monarchs. The leader had the strength of a middle Dao monarch, which made it a rather strong team. Capturing these low-level disciples was a piece of cake for them. Lei Xingfeng sighed. He said, "I see. Then I'm sorry." The person was confused. "What?" Lei Xingfeng suddenly stretched out his hand. Immediately, countless electric currents formed a network that enveloped them. In an instant, there were jumping electric arcs. The leader of the Dao monarchs was shocked and tried his best to resist. When the electric current hit him, he began to tremble violently. The people behind him all went limp and were knocked out by the electric current. Lei Xingfeng said, "Not bad. You can resist for a while." The person struggled and said, "Why?" With a plop, he fell to the ground and fainted. Lei Xingfeng said indifferently, "No reason. Because I'm with them." Chapter 826. Gao Yi laughed. "A Feng, your original status is very high. I actually have to call you Lord." Lei Xingfeng said, "Of course, I'm a Restriction Grandmaster. In the Mingzhe Alliance, Restriction Masters have an extremely high status. Moreover, I'm a Restriction Grandmaster. Even if a Monarch rank expert sees me, he will have to be polite." Thunderstorm said, "What should we do with these people?" Lei Xingfeng roared, "Capture them and send them back to the Mirror Realm. There are also hostages that can be used to exchange for our people." Thunderstorm slapped his thigh and laughed. Good idea. Let's do that." Gao Yi personally captured these people and sent them back to the Mirror Realm. Then, he specially sent people to guard them. Then, he returned to catch up with Lei Xingfeng and the others. With someone leading the way, Lei Xingfeng quickly arrived at the mining site. A few hundred people from the secret sect were gathered here. Almost everyone was here. When Lei Xingfeng arrived, they were all tied up on the ground. They were surrounded by the experts of the Mingzhe Alliance. Xi and Feng didn't even speak much. He immediately threw out a lightning net, and Gao Yi followed suit, blocking their path with a thunderstorm, at the same time sending out bolts of lightning. As Lei Xingfeng's lightning net was too sharp, he attacked without hesitation. One had to know that his current level was extremely high. Any simple attack could not be withstood. When the lightning net fell, except for a few who escaped, the others all fell to the ground and fainted. Those who escaped were attacked by Thunderstorm and Gao Yi. The leader had the strength of a peak, Dao, lord like Thunderstorm. Therefore, Thunderstorm's sneak attack did not kill him. That person roared, "Who are you? How dare you go against the Ming-Zhe alliance?" Lei Xingfeng was very careful. If he attacked the person lying on the ground now, there would be no room for regret. Therefore, he directly rushed over and reached out to grab him. That Dao Lord old ancestor snorted coldly as a layer of purple light appeared on his body. It was Xi and Feng's first time seeing a true body of this color, but he didn't think too much about it and grabbed that man's shoulder. That person roared, "Let go!" With a shake of his shoulder, a layer of purple light flickered as a surge of energy was released from his body. It was a pity that he met Xi and Feng and not Lei Bao. The difference between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was no way for him to escape. Lei Xingfeng said coldly, "Let go? In your dreams." That man was shocked to discover that not only was he unable to escape from Xi and Feng's hand, he was even gripped by that hand to the point of pain. He could not help but shout, "Ah, ah." Lei Xingfeng pulled hard and dragged that person to his side. He raised his hand and slapped him. He controlled his strength. He knew that if he did not control it, his head would be sent flying. That person fainted with just one slap. One had to know that he was a person who had activated his true body. Even so, he could not block Lei Xingfeng's attack. Gao Yi, Thunderstorm, and the little guy who led the way began to untie everyone. Then, they used ropes to tie up the people of the Ming-Zhe alliance. These ropes were specially made. Ordinary cultivators would find it difficult to break free. Of course, if you reach the level of a Dao Lord Old Ancestor, you would need another type of rope, a rope that could control your seal. After tying up the people messily, Lei Xingfeng said, "Take them back to the mirror realm. Remember, lock them in the little black room." After sending them back to the mirror realm, Lei Xingfeng said, "Aye, Uncle Gao, we still have many people in the hands of the Ming-Zhe alliance. We have to get them back." At this moment, Wu Yang and Gucci arrived. They appeared directly from the mining area. Their expressions were not good. This accident had caused the entire secret sect to be in a mess. Wu Yang said, "A phone, how is it?" Lei Xingfeng said, "We came in time. We have about 200 to 300 people in the hands of the Ming-Zhe alliance. We have to save them. Unfortunately, this is not the time to clash with the Ming-Zhe alliance." Gucci said, "That's not a big deal. At most, we'll just fight." Lei Xingfeng laughed bitterly. If he had not advanced to the Dao Saint level and had 2 true ring bodies, he would not have had the courage to clash with the Ming-Zhe alliance. After all, he had lived in the Ming-Zhe alliance for a period of time and knew many people from the Ming-Zhe alliance. He knew that the Ming-Zhe alliance had a strong foundation. Without absolute strength, he could not fight them head-on. Lei Xingfeng explained the situation and said, "We have not suffered any casualties yet. This is also because our people are all low-level cultivators. Even if we resist, it would be useless. The Ming-Zhe alliance also did not kill anyone. So, I think that the people who were captured are still alive. We just have to think of a way to save them." Wu Yang and Gucci felt their scalps go numb. They knew the strength of the Ming-Zhe alliance. If a battle were to break out, they basically had no chance of winning. This meant that if all the members of the secret sect were to fight with the Ming-Zhe alliance, the only result would be complete annihilation. Of course, this did not include Lei Xingfeng's strength. With Lei Xingfeng's current strength, he could already fight against the Ming-Zhe alliance. However, it was limited to one person. The other members of the secret sect could only watch the show. It would not be their turn to fight. Wu Yang said, "Try to get our people back. I also don't want to fight against the Ming-Zhe alliance. They are too strong." Gucci said, "There's only one way. Everyone looked at Gucci. Lei Xingfeng asked, "What way?" Gucci said, "Capture their people. Capture as many of them as possible. Capture the experts. Then negotiate." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "I think so too. That's why I didn't kill them. And if this method doesn't work, then it will be troublesome." Wu Yang said, "If it doesn't work, what do we do?" Lei Xingfeng said, "What else can we do? Kill our way to the headquarters of the Ming-Zhe alliance and capture their people. That should be enough to negotiate." He was also helpless. This was not a matter of being unreasonable. They were challenging the entire Ming-Zhe alliance. Originally, Lei Xingfeng did not want to provoke the Ming-Zhe alliance. This was the reason why he did not want to go back. This was the reason why. When the Ming-Zhe alliance grew, there would be many experts. Perhaps there were no Dao Saint experts, but there should be peak sovereign kings. If there were 3 or 4 of them, Lei Xingfeng would not be afraid. However, if there were 7 or 8 of them, Lei Xingfeng would have a headache. Lei Xingfeng said, "Later, everyone follow me. I want to see if the people from our secret sect are up there. If they are, then we can save them and leave. I'm just afraid that they will be transported away. That would be troublesome." Wu Yang said, "Then we have to hurry." Lei Xingfeng said, "All right, let's go. Follow the tunnel. If we meet our people, quickly bring them back." He knew that there would definitely be clever disciples hiding. He had to find them and bring them back. They followed the tunnel out. Wu Yang, Thunderstorm, and Gao Yi followed. Gucci led the others to look for the missing secret sect disciples in the tunnel. If they found them, they would send them back to the mirror world. Lei Xingfeng and the other 3 walked very quickly. Soon, they reached the exit of the tunnel. Outside, there were warriors from the Ming-Zhe alliance. All of them were on guard. A few Dao Lord experts were standing at the entrance. When Lei Xingfeng and the other 3 came out, they were immediately surrounded. The leader was also a peak Dao monarch old ancestor. Without waiting for him to speak, Xi and Feng attacked. He couldn't be bothered to say anything to them. He knew that no matter what he said, they wouldn't let him go. They wouldn't give up on fighting either. What was the point of talking? Just go and fight. The huge electric current quickly formed a net. Lei Xingfeng raised his hands. Countless thick electric currents turned into a huge net. As soon as he attacked, it expanded and fell. It was so fast that no one could react. No one knew that Lei Xingfeng would attack as soon as he came out. The net fell. Instantly, silver snakes danced. A dazzling brilliance flashed and expanded quickly. No one could dodge. They wanted to block, but Lei Xingfeng's net was not a joke. He was extremely strong. His casual attack was extremely sharp. With one move, the ground was covered. Only a few people were lucky enough to escape. Lei Xingfeng opened his palm. Countless thick electric currents shot out. In an instant, those who were lucky enough to escape were all hit. This speed was simply terrifying. Wu Yang, Gao Yi, and Thunderstorm stood there speechlessly. The 3 of them were also shocked. This was too strong. There were at least 500 to 600 people surrounding the entrance of the tunnel. Most of them were true lords. This was already very strong. They did not expect that Lei Xingfeng would take them all down in 2 moves. No one could escape. Lei Xingfeng said, "Call people to tie them up." Gao Yi said, "I'll do it." He returned to the mirror realm and brought a group of people back to the original place. He tied up all the people lying on the ground with special ropes and brought them back to the mirror realm. Every captive was blindfolded. Even if they woke up, they would not know where they were. Cultivators were very resilient. Even in a harsh environment, their ability to survive was extraordinary. Therefore, there was no need to give these people preferential treatment. If they could be tied up, they couldn't be released. If they could be locked up, they couldn't be released. If they were in the mirror world, they wouldn't be able to do anything. The people at the entrance of the tunnel were all swept away. They were all captured and imprisoned in the mirror realm. There were indeed such places in the mirror realm. They were pre-prepared warehouses. Many of them were empty. These warehouses had restrictions placed by Lei Xingfeng. They had been modified many times. Now, the warehouses were not only ordinary restrictions, but also spatial restrictions. Not to mention storing things, it was very useful to imprison prisoners. Even if the ropes binding these people were loosened, they would not be able to rush out of the warehouse. Lei Xingfeng said, find some people and search. Also, if you find any enemies, don't fight them. Immediately return to me. It was a pity that the secret sect did not have enough people. They had no choice but to send out some low-level disciples. These people could not fight, but finding people should not be a problem. A few hundred true and monarch-level disciples were released. They searched a large area and attracted many mind guards. However, Lei Xingfeng, Gao Yi, Thunderstorm, and Wu Yang acted. They were all captured. In the end, they attracted an expert, a monarch-level expert. Chapter 827. This person was the person in charge of the mining area. However, he didn't care about the details, as he had subordinates to do it for him. He was just guarding this place, and there were many benefits. It was a relatively lucrative job, but it was this job that made him unlucky. This guy was too lazy to fight with the disciples of the secret sections. Instead, he grabbed one and rushed towards Lei Xingfeng's position. When he saw Lei Xingfeng and the others, he immediately threw down the disciple in his hand and rushed towards them, saying, "Brat, are you the one causing trouble? Where did you come from?" These words were directed at Thunderstorm. He didn't even know who was the strongest. As a monarch rank expert, even if it was a beginner monarch rank, he was still a top existence in the Mingzhe Alliance. His status was extremely high. Of course, he would speak arrogantly and look down on others, especially his enemies. Lei Xingfeng instantly laughed and said, "I knew it. How could there be no experts? It's the Mingzhe Alliance after all. For such an important place, there should be a monarch rank expert guarding it." As expected, he really came. That person said, "Are you going to surrender, or do you want me to do it myself? You have guts. You actually dare to act so arrogantly in the territory of the Mingzhe Alliance." Lei Xingfeng said, "Where did the people you captured go?" That person said, "Captured people? What people?" Lei Xingfeng immediately knew that if he didn't capture so many people, he probably wouldn't have been alerted. As for the people he captured, it was useless to ask him. Lei Xingfeng said, "Oh, since you don't know, then forget it. It's fine if I can capture you." This sentence made that person furious. That person pointed at the tip of his nose and said, You capture me? Huh, you can capture me." He simply couldn't believe it. He was stunned. He had seen bold people before, but he had never seen such a brainless and bold person. Even a peak monarch rank expert would find it difficult to capture him alive. It might not be difficult to defeat him, but to capture a monarch rank expert was too difficult. Hence, that person couldn't believe that Lei Xingfeng dared to speak like this. And what made him angrier was that when Lei Xingfeng spoke, he was really confident and looked like he would do what he said. This was really intolerable. Lei Xingfeng didn't waste any more words and directly attacked with a thick electric current. That person roared and immediately released his true body. At the monarch rank, even if it was a beginner monarch rank, the strength of his true body was very terrifying. This was because the true body at the monarch rank had basically condensed into a solid body. Its defense and attack power had reached a very terrifying level. A 50 to 60 meter tall true body was extremely pressuring to cultivators who weren't monarch rank. That kind of deterrence was absolutely crushing. Wu Yang and the others quickly retreated. They didn't have any intention of releasing their true bodies. With Lei Xingfeng around, they didn't want to fight. Lei Xingfeng didn't have to release his true body to fight the Dao Lord Old Ancestor. However, if he encountered a monarch rank expert, it wasn't worth it to not release his true body. Hence, he released his true body. Everyone saw a funny scene. Lei Xingfeng's true body was more than 200 meters tall, and the opponent's true body was more than 50 to 60 meters tall. The difference was like a giant man and a child. Not to mention the difference, just looking at the appearance, that person was far inferior. When Lei Xingfeng released his true body, that person was dumbfounded. In any case, he was still a monarch rank. He still had some eyesight. The opponent's cultivation was so high that there was no end to it. That person had a huge question in his heart. Who was this person? How could he have such a high cultivation? He could vaguely feel that Lei Xingfeng seemed to be even higher than a peak monarch rank. That person was about to cry. The opponent was unexpectedly strong. Moreover, it was to the extent that it made him despair. A monarch rank expert wasn't a low-level cultivator who didn't know anything. He was already standing at the peak of cultivators. However, what he didn't know was that Lei Xingfeng's cultivation technique was already from the outside world. It wasn't a local concept. This kind of despair was quickly reflected. Lei Xingfeng swung his fist. Just one punch. Just one punch. That person braced himself and took the blow. Just this blow made him lose all confidence. He could see that Lei Xingfeng's blow was really casual. Just this casual blow almost caused his true body to collapse. This punch made his true body tremble violently. His seal was also crackling. That person had already used all his strength to block, but he still couldn't block it. His true body kept retreating, trying to dissipate the power of the attack. After retreating 10 steps, that person couldn't even maintain his true body. He instantly retracted his true body. Actually, this punch had already injured his seal. He admitted defeat very straightforwardly. He knew that if the opponent really attacked him with all his strength, he would definitely die. And he would die very miserably. Those who could cultivate to the monarch stage weren't stupid. Furthermore, all of them had a bright future ahead of them. They definitely wouldn't do things that put their lives on the line unless it was absolutely necessary. He admitted defeat very straightforwardly and said, "You've won. Are you going to kill me?" Lei Xingfeng also retracted his true body and said indifferently, "Why would I kill you? Since you've admitted defeat, there's no need for me to kill you. However, you have to contact the Mingzhe Alliance and let my people go." That person immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He was most afraid that the opponent wouldn't distinguish between right and wrong and would kill him first. That would be a wrongful death. There was room for negotiation, which was equivalent to saving his life. Lei Xingfeng didn't tie him up. This person was a monarch stage expert. Lei Xingfeng would still give him this preferential treatment. Furthermore, Lei Xingfeng didn't plan to bring him into the mirror realm. He simply placed a restriction on his body. To be precise, he placed a restriction on his seal, temporarily preventing him from using his seal. This also completely restricted his strength. At this time, he couldn't even beat Wu Yang in Thunderstorm. That person said, "May I ask, who are you?" Lei Xingfeng said, "My name is Lei Xingfeng." He couldn't be bothered to hide it. After all, he had been in the Mingzhe Alliance for so many years and knew a lot of people. Therefore, he didn't plan to hide it. That person looked at Lei Xingfeng suspiciously and said, This name, I seem to have heard it somewhere before." Lei Xingfeng himself didn't know. Among the upper echelons of the Mingzhe Alliance, his reputation was quite well known. There were quite a lot of people who knew about him. It was only after he disappeared that it gradually died down. Of course, there were many experts who had a little impression of him. Wu Yang said, "What's your name?" That person raised his head and completely ignored Wu Yang. He felt that he was defeated by Lei Xingfeng, not Wu Yang. Therefore, he completely ignored Wu Yang's question. Wu Yang was so angry that he wanted to beat him up. Gao Yi stopped him and said, "Let a Feng handle this." Lei Xingfeng said, "As a captive, you have to have the consciousness of a captive. If you still act like an expert, I think the unlucky one will be you." That person suddenly became depressed. After a while, he said, "My name is Chia, the person in charge of this mine. Some of your people have been sent to the headquarters. Some of them are still here, but we didn't kill anyone. They're all alive." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Release the people here. As for the people who went to the headquarters, I will go with you." Chia was suddenly stunned. He said, "You will go with me to the headquarters?" Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, "Why can't I go?" Chia's expression suddenly changed as if he was alive again. He said, of course you can go." His voice became louder. Lei Xingfeng knew why this guy was so excited. This was because the headquarters had a lot of experts. Chia probably believed that if he went to the headquarters, then he wouldn't be able to escape. The experts from the headquarters would definitely be able to catch him. It wasn't strange that he was so excited. Wu Yang and the others had a faint smile on their faces. Ever since Lei Xingfeng fought with the outsiders, Wu Yang and the others had a near-blind trust in Lei Xingfeng. They believed in his strength and believed that since he dared to make such a request, then he had absolute confidence. They were the closest people to Lei Xingfeng. They knew that Lei Xingfeng wasn't a reckless person. On the contrary, they all knew that Lei Xingfeng was always very careful outside. Since Qi was captured, the entire mine was in chaos. Lei Xingfeng forced Qi to release the captured people quickly. Then, Lei Xingfeng directly destroyed the large teleportation gate of the camp. Qi was stunned. He asked doubtfully, "Aren't we going to the headquarters?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Yes, we're going to the headquarters. However, I won't use this teleportation gate. I can use my secret gate to go there." When one's strength reached Lei Xingfeng's current level, his secret gate could teleport long distances. Even if he didn't use the Mirror Realm's secret gate, he could still reach the headquarters of the Mingzhe Alliance. He was very familiar with that place. Qi was still stunned. He was a little stunned by Lei Xingfeng. One must know that the continent where the mine was located was very far away from the Mingzhe Alliance's continent. Lei Xingfeng actually used his secret gate to go there. What kind of strength did he have to be able to do that? Lei Xingfeng did something that made Qi want to vomit blood. He said, "Send out our people. Full force mining in this mine." Everyone understood what he meant. They were going to use brute force to mine, using the craziest methods in the shortest time possible. Then, they would take most of the ore and abandon the rest. Qi couldn't help but smile bitterly. How much manpower and resources did they expend? How many people died to get this mine? Now it was going to be wasted. Lei Xingfeng brought Qi out of this continent and came to the Mingzhe Alliance's continent. Qi was about to go crazy. How was this person so familiar with the Mingzhe Alliance? When they arrived at the Mingzhe Alliance's headquarters, Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to stand there carelessly. He wasn't that stupid. He directly released his true body and punched the ground. His true body was more than 200 meters tall. The result of the punch was a huge pit. Moreover, the explosion of smoke was very clear. The Mingzhe Alliance hadn't had an enemy attack for a long time. Therefore, the entire Mingzhe Alliance's headquarters was in chaos. Countless experts flew over and saw Lei Xingfeng's true body. They all landed far away and walked towards where Lei Xingfeng was, slowing down. Chapter 828. No one was stupid. With such a real body, it meant that this person's strength was too high. It wasn't something that an ordinary person could withstand. Therefore, no one was stupid enough to rush up first. Revealing one's true body, especially the true body of a high-level practitioner, was a battle stance. This was something all high-level practitioners agreed upon, especially Exine Feng, who was already standing in front of the headquarters of the Mingzhe Alliance, releasing his true body and waving his fists. Although he didn't attack any buildings, the fact that he punched the ground meant that he was here to provoke them and not for friendly interaction. Therefore, the entire Mingzhe Alliance was alarmed. Because Lei Xingfeng's real body and aura were too frightening, the experts of the Mingzhe Alliance didn't dare to get close. They just surrounded him from afar. Many experts also revealed their real bodies. After all, the defense of the real body was completely different from the real body. Soon, Lei Xingfeng saw a circle of real bodies appear. The tallest one was no more than 100 meters. Lei Xingfeng sighed in his heart. This Mingzhe Alliance's foundation was really deep. There were so many experts. He even saw a few familiar faces. They also revealed their real bodies. However, there was still a difference between the real body and the real body. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng wasn't recognized. Lei Xingfeng pointed at Qi and said, "You go and negotiate. It's very simple. Let my people go, and I will also let your people go. We won't have anything to do with each other. We will leave." Qi ran away. He had seen Lei Xingfeng's strength. However, he still had a fantasy in his heart. After all, the Mingzhe Alliance had countless experts. There were also many top experts. He believed that they should be able to defeat Lei Xingfeng. More and more people gathered around. Lei Xingfeng stood still. It must be known that when a high-level cultivator revealed their real body, it would consume a lot of energy. Even if they didn't move, it would consume a lot of energy to maintain their real body. Lei Xingfeng didn't move, and the others didn't dare to move. This group of experts from the Ming-Zhe alliance secretly complained. Lei Xingfeng didn't care at all. He had 2 true ring bodies. His energy was restrained and could circulate on its own. Therefore, the energy consumption was almost negligible. It didn't matter how long he stood there. Xi and Feng calculated silently. There were quite a few people who had released their true bodies. From what Xi and Feng could see, most of them were low-level monarchs. Around 20 of them, there were 7 mid-level and high-level monarchs. As for peak-level monarchs, there wasn't a single one. Just the appearance of the monarchs made Xi and Feng sigh. The strength of the Ming-Zhe alliance was indeed deep. If he didn't have 2 true ring bodies, even if he was a peak-level monarch, he wouldn't dare to come to the Ming-Zhe alliance. He would be beaten half to death. Of course, it would be hard for a peak-level monarch to die, even if he wanted to. Even if they ganged up on him, it wouldn't be a problem for him to escape. Now, that Lei Xingfeng had 2 true ring bodies. Even if they ganged up on him, he wouldn't care. The most crucial part was already solved. A cultivator with 2 true ring bodies would have their energy consumption reduced to a level where they could circulate on their own. Unless there was an equal opponent, no one would be able to shake Lei Xingfeng's real body. This was the foundation that he could rely on. After waiting for another 10 minutes, every cultivator who revealed their real body was extremely tormented. No one dared to challenge him. The opponent's real body was obviously powerful, which high-level cultivator didn't understand. It was no wonder that it took so long. She had to go over and find the person in charge of the Ming-Zhe alliance. This was a huge matter. It wasn't something that could be decided by 1 or 2 people. Therefore, it would take a long time. Lei Xingfeng waited for another 10 minutes. He started to get impatient. He waved his fist and smashed it on the ground again. He shouted, "What's the matter? No one cares. Then don't blame me for being impolite." Originally, these high-level cultivators could still endure. However, after Lei Xingfeng's provocation, they started to get angry. One must know that they were used to being arrogant. Even in the Ming-Zhe alliance, they were the top existences. Normally, no one would dare to speak to them loudly, let alone speak to them in such a rude manner. Therefore, some people couldn't hold it in and shouted, "You're underestimating our Ming-Zhe alliance. Brothers, beat him up." They still had some rationality in their hearts and didn't say that they would kill him. Immediately, 7 or 8 people who were usually more violent rushed towards Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng let out a cold laugh. This laugh was so loud that it made those who wanted to charge hesitant. They couldn't help but hesitate. This cold laugh was filled with disdain. It directly crashed into everyone's hearts. At the front were 2 beginner-level monarchs. Behind them was a high-level monarch. The few of them quickly formed a battle group and rushed forward in a semi-encirclement. At this moment, the importance of speed could be seen. These 7 or 8 people were moving very slowly. Every step they took on the ground made a loud sound. Their true bodies were very heavy, especially when they reached the monarch rank. They advanced step by step. If Lei Xingfeng was just an ordinary cultivator, he would feel that this kind of advancement was very terrifying. It was a kind of crushing impact. Unfortunately, Lei Xingfeng's current strength wasn't afraid at all. He even felt that these guys were charging too slowly. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng directly went up to meet them. This move scared everyone. Because of speed, Lei Xingfeng's speed was very fast. In a few steps, he was close to the fastest person. Boom! Without hesitation, he punched. With just one punch, that person was knocked to the ground. In an instant, that person's true body collapsed, and his imprint was heavily injured. Following that, Lei Xingfeng punched again, sending another person flying. His true body collapsed in midair, and his true body fell. Even that middle-level monarch rank couldn't block Lei Xingfeng's punch and was also knocked to the ground. The remaining people were so scared that they turned and ran. What a joke. They weren't blind. Lei Xingfeng knocked down one person with one punch. This kind of attack power they had never heard of before. Lei Xingfeng roared, "Fight!" If they chased and fought, as long as they were hit, no one would be able to protect their true body. All of them would end up the same. Their true bodies would collapse, and their imprints would be heavily injured. After injuring 5 people consecutively, Lei Xingfeng stopped and said, "Who else wants to fight?" Immediately, the entire Ming-Zhe alliance was speechless. This was too powerful. It wasn't that the high-level cultivators didn't want to fight, but after seeing Lei Xingfeng's attack, no one dared to say that they would be unharmed. One must know that even a middle-level monarch rank was knocked down with one punch. The scariest thing was that their true body would collapse and their imprint would be heavily injured. To recover, it would take a lot of materials and energy. Lei Xingfeng continued to roar, "Who wants to fight?" All the experts of Ming-Zhe alliance were like quails. All of them shrunk their necks and lowered their heads. No one dared to come out. After a long while, no one answered. Lei Xingfeng roared, "Let them go, or fight." No one answered. "Do you want me to destroy the headquarters of Ming-Zhe alliance?" This was too serious. Once Lei Xingfeng took action, the buildings and people here would suffer heavy losses. Someone shouted, "Can you wait? We are still figuring out the situation." This incident happened too suddenly. No one understood why such an expert would come to the headquarters. Furthermore, it seemed like his men had been captured. This matter was serious. Some people started to treat the people lying on the ground, while others rushed towards the headquarters building. This matter had gone too far. 5 experts were heavily injured, and they were all monarch rank experts. In the Ming-Zhe alliance, they were considered strategic forces and would not be easily mobilized. In the end, they were all punched one by one and fell to the ground. A high-level monarch rank came forward and said, "Can you wait?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Let them go first. I'm too lazy to say more. I'll count to 3. If you don't let them go, I'll start smashing." The high-level monarch rank's face turned green. This guy was unreasonable. He said, "Must you become enemies with our Ming-Zhe alliance?" Xian Feng spoke, "Why would I have any enmity with your Ming-Zhe alliance? If it weren't for my men being captured, I wouldn't have bothered with you. All right, I'll start counting." The high-level monarch rank hurriedly said, "Stop counting. I'll order them to let them go." Lei Xingfeng then took a step back and said, "All right, since you're willing to let them go, I won't bully you anymore." When everyone heard this, they almost vomited blood. They were all high-level cultivators. Most of them were monarch rank experts. This was the first time they heard someone say this. "I won't bully you anymore." Was there anything more infuriating than this? However, Lei Xingfeng's strength had already gained a recognition of this group of arrogant people. Anyway, no one present dared to say that they could take a punch from Lei Xingfeng. Just this point alone gave Lei Xingfeng the most advantageous position. Actually, among the people who rushed up just now, there was a familiar person. Lei Xingfeng didn't attack and let him go. However, that guy didn't recognize Lei Xingfeng at all. After all, Lei Xingfeng's real body was different. Plus, Lei Xingfeng's strength was very strong now. Hence, it was normal that he couldn't recognize him. Very quickly, about a dozen low-level cultivators from the secret sect were brought up. Lei Xingfeng asked them to come over. With a wave of his hand, they were kept in the mirror realm. At the same time, he waved his hand again and released the people who were imprisoned in the mirror realm. They were all the cultivators that were captured previously. Lei Xingfeng said, "I won't bully you guys. I'll return the people that I captured to you guys. We're even now." Someone went up to help the cultivators who were lying on the ground. The group of experts from the Ming-Zhe alliance were also complaining in their hearts. Because Lei Xingfeng didn't leave, they didn't dare to keep the real body. After a long time, even if they were the top experts of the Ming-Zhe alliance, they wouldn't be able to handle this. Someone said, "The old ancestor is here." Lei Xingfeng thought, "Old ancestor? The old ancestor of the Ming-Zhe alliance? What's that?" The 2 old men were really very old. For Lei Xingfeng, after stepping into the ranks of cultivators in this world, he had seen too many people who had gone through many years. According to the perspective of his previous world, the cultivators in this world were all immortals who could live for a very long time. Anyway, Lei Xingfeng hadn't seen many who died of old age. Most of them died in battle or died after being seriously injured. There were very few who truly lived to the end of their lives. Chapter 829. Of course, this was for high-level cultivators. It was not possible for low-level cultivators. However, even low-level cultivators could live longer than normal people. Many years at that. This world was indeed biased towards cultivators. The two old men in front of him, no matter if it was in terms of spirit, chi, or spirit, they were extremely old. They were even trembling when they walked. The two of them stood 100 meters away from Lei Xingfeng. The other cultivators were on guard. Then, Lei Xingfeng saw the two of them reveal their true bodies. They were 140 meters tall. Lei Xingfeng was secretly shocked. He knew that a single seal was basically the limit. In other words, they had cultivated to the limit of a single seal. The two of them were peak stage monarchs. However, because they did not have any new cultivation techniques or new cultivation methods, they were stuck in this realm and could not improve anymore. This was the foundation of Ming-Zhe Alliance. They were also their strongest experts. With the appearance of the two old men's true bodies, their auras were completely different. The kind of extremely dense aura instantly spread out, causing Xian Feng to feel a bit apprehensive. Luckily, he had two true ring bodies, and there was a difference in quality. If he didn't have the dual lightning stamp, he would probably be in trouble today. Lei Xingfeng said, "You want to test out your moves?" He immediately saw through the intentions of the two. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Even when he was a restriction grandmaster in the Ming-Zhe Alliance, he had never seen these two old monsters. It seemed like these two people were the backstage of the Ming-Zhe Alliance. They were the top fighting force of the Ming-Zhe Alliance. The two of them looked very serious. They did not look down on Lei Xingfeng at all. To be able to have such a huge true body, this person was not simple. One of the old men said, "I did not expect to meet an opponent stronger than us in this life." How lucky. This old man had a fire attribute true body. There were layers of blue and white flames on his body. He looked very beautiful. The other old man had an ice attribute true body. The moment he appeared, he emitted a white mist. The surrounding air instantly condensed into countless ice particles. The two true bodies were truly ice and fire. Lei Xingfeng maintained his true form and said calmly, "It's my honor to be able to consult the two of you." The old man with the fire true body said, "There shouldn't be any deep hatred between us, right?" Lei Xingfeng shook his head and said, "No, it's just, it's a misunderstanding." After the rescue, his enmity had completely disappeared. In addition, he had received benefits from a Ming-Zhe Alliance in the past, so he could not bring himself to hate the Ming-Zhe Alliance. The two elders heaved a sigh of relief. If this kind of expert was an enemy that would not rest until one of them was dead, the Ming-Zhe Alliance would be in big trouble this time. Another old man said, "No matter who wins or loses, both sides will stop fighting and make peace after the battle. What do you think?" Lei Xingfeng suddenly smiled and said, "No problem." The two elders were immediately overjoyed. Even they could not afford to provoke such an enemy. It would be best if they could resolve this peacefully. The two of them were old and experienced people. How could they not see Lei Xingfeng's strength? They were willing to use this opportunity to get to know such an expert, no matter the price. To the two elders, the battle was just to test how strong Lei Xingfeng was. This way, they could roughly judge Lei Xingfeng's level and strength. All the experts from the Ming-Zhe Alliance were excited. Under the command of a high-level sovereign king, all of them spread out. At the same time, they chased away the disciples from the Ming-Zhe Alliance who were watching the show. Once this kind of battle started, just the power that spread out would kill people. Therefore, they needed to block it from afar, especially those buildings, to prevent the spreading power from destroying the buildings. The two elders, one on the left and one on the right, launched their attacks at the same time. Lei Xingfeng aimed at the ice attribute elder's true body. He knew that Gao Yi was an ice attribute sovereign. Ice attribute attacks would have a slow effect, so he directly faced the ice attribute elder. The huge fists collided, and a shock wave spread out. Boom! The entire ground shook. The ice attribute elder's true body was forced back 2 steps. Lei Xingfeng did not move at all. He then punched out again. This time, Lei Xingfeng used 60% of his strength, and his fist was covered in lightning. The ice attribute elder's fist was instantly covered in thick ice, and he also launched a counterattack. Boom! Gotcha! The ice on the ice attribute elder's fist instantly shattered, and he retreated again. Lei Xingfeng did not know that the ice attribute elder was extremely shocked. Ever since he cultivated to the peak of Sovereign King, no one was able to force him to retreat, and no one was able to shatter the ice on his fist. This was the first time. The fire attribute elder had already rushed to Lei Xingfeng's side and suddenly punched out. Lei Xingfeng did not care at all and continued to exchange blows with the ice attribute elder. The fire attribute elder's fist also landed on his shoulder. Layers of lightning fluctuated on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder and instantly extinguished the burning flames. Lei Xingfeng shouted, and a huge leg swept out. The fire attribute elder did not expect Lei Xingfeng to lift his leg. Normally, when fighting with the true body, most people would use their fists to attack, or use their palms to chop, or use their palms to whip, or at most, use their elbows to attack. However, very few people like to use their legs to attack. One must know that the true body was huge, and if one was not careful, it would be difficult to climb back up. Especially for experts of their level, stability was the most important. However, Lei Xingfeng lifted his leg, and this leg was not a kick, but a sweep, forcing the fire attribute elder to raise his arms in an attempt to block this sweep. A loud rumbling sound rang out. Flames shot out in all directions, and countless sparks flew. Thunder rumbled, and electric arcs flashed chaotically. The power of this attack was too great, and the violent shockwave actually flipped some people over. About 10 houses collapsed, and smoke rose into the air. The fire elemental elder couldn't stand still at all. He retreated dozens of steps in a row before he exhausted the power of the attack. However, he also found that the arm of his true body showed signs of collapsing. He cried out in shock. Good. So powerful. Lei Xingfeng originally wanted to kick again, but the ice attribute elder had already attacked, and this kick landed on the ice attribute elder. The power of the foot was always stronger than the fist, so this kick caused the ice attribute elder to be in extreme pain, and his arm almost collapsed. They were all very solid attacks, and every punch and kick was either a sweep, a kick, a chop, or a hammer. They fought until the sky turned dark, and sand and stones flew everywhere. Flames and ice particles, lightning and flashes. The battle between the three became more and more intense, and Lei Xingfeng also became more and more serious. Although these two elders were one level lower than him, they were still very strong. If he wanted to defeat them, he would need to work harder. If it was a life and death battle, Lei Xingfeng would have ended it long ago. Since it was just a test, he could not be too ruthless and make Lei Xingfeng feel a little restrained. Gradually, as the battle progressed, Lei Xingfeng began to let loose. He was not a person who stuck to the rules. In the territory of the Ming-Zhe alliance, if he held back and something happened to this thing, it would not be fun. Therefore, his attacks began to become more powerful and unrestrained. Under the full force attack, the ice attribute elder finally could not hold on. The ice armor on his true body shattered, and his entire body trembled. This was an attack with 80% of Lei Xingfeng's strength, and it could be considered his full strength. At the same time, a powerful punch directly smashed towards the fire attribute elder's head. If this punch landed, the fire attribute elder's head would probably burst open. The spectators exclaimed. One must know that these two elders were the top existences in the Ming-Zhe alliance, and yet they were being suppressed by Lei Xingfeng alone. At the beginning, the two of them could still handle it, but as time passed, they gradually showed signs of fatigue and were a little overwhelmed. Everyone understood that the two of them were not Lei Xingfeng's opponent. This punch caused the fire attribute elder to quickly retreat. He did not dare to receive it. Not to mention his head. Even if he received it with his fist, he would not be able to withstand it. Enough, enough, stop! The fire attribute elder had no choice but to shout. Lei Xingfeng's other punch was already close to him, and he only stopped when he heard the elder shout. The ice attribute elder also waved his hand and said, forget it, forget it. I won't fight anymore. I can't beat you. Lei Xingfeng laughed and stopped. He actually did not want to continue fighting. Unless it was a life and death battle. He had enough of testing his moves. He knew in his heart that even two peak stage monarchs were not his match. Second ring true body was really powerful to the extreme. The ice attribute elder and the fire attribute elder withdrew their true body at the same time. The fire attribute elder said, all right, withdraw your true body. It's fine now. The surrounding high-leveled cultivators withdrew their true body. This meant that there would be no more fighting. The meaning of withdrawing their true body was very clear. Xian Feng smiled faintly as he retracted his true body. The ice attribute elder said, everyone disperse. What are you all gathered here for? Don't you all have anything to do? Everyone dispersed. No one dared to stay. Who would dare to disobey the old ancestors' words? Lei Xingfeng withdrew his true body and planned to leave the Ming-Zhe alliance. The fire attribute elder said, can you come over and sit with us? He had a lot of things to say, especially about Lei Xingfeng's cultivation. He had too many questions. The ice attribute elder also said, since you're here, let's get to know each other. It's not easy to be a high-level cultivator. We should get to know each other better. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, all right, let's go and sit. As the high-level cultivators were all chased away by the two old ancestors, Lei Xingfeng's familiar people also left. Therefore, no one knew that Lei Xingfeng was once the Ming-Zhe Alliance's restriction master. Lei Xingfeng followed the two elders inside. At this time, a group of attendants ran out in 3 cars. They politely invited the 3 of them to board. Lei Xingfeng did not decline and directly boarded one of the cars. The 2 elders were probably tired as well. They boarded the car and headed to the Ming-Zhe Alliance's headquarters. After about half an hour, the car stopped. 2 attendants opened the car door and said respectfully, please get off the car. We're here. Lei Xingfeng walked out of the car. It was under the shade of a tree, and the surroundings were unusually quiet. A stone road extended in. The 2 elders stood at the intersection and waited. When they saw Lei Xingfeng coming over, the fire attribute elder said, please follow me. He actually personally led the way. Chapter 830. Lei Xingfeng had never been to this place before. He followed the fire element elder, and Lei Xingfeng walked in with the ice element elder by his side. The surrounding attendants were all surprised. They had never seen the 2 elders so attentive. Xian Feng didn't put on any airs. His attitude was very easygoing. Even to the attendants, he would nod his head in acknowledgement. The place where the elders lived was, of course, very exquisite. The Ming-Zhe Alliance was rich and had a lot of manpower. For the 2 strongest experts of the Ming-Zhe Alliance, they did their best to give them the best treatment. Everything was the best and most exquisite. Although the entire building wasn't very luxurious according to everyone's preferences, every building and every item was made with the best materials and the best craftsmen. Lei Xingfeng followed them into a pavilion. This pavilion was very big and was many times better than the wooden shed in Lei Xingfeng's courtyard. The building materials, just the wood, were all materials that could calm the nerves. It also emitted a faint woody fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy. The 3 of them sat down, and the attendants placed all kinds of fruits. The fire element elder instructed, all right, all of you are dismissed. No matter who comes, we won't meet them. Just say that we are busy. The attendants left, and the 3 of them sat down. The fire element elder said, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Bai Zhua. I'm a retired old man in the Ming-Zhe Alliance. You can call me Old Bai or Old Bai. The ice element elder said, Yin Jian. I'm Hai Yin Jian. You can call me Yin Jian or Old Hai. Whatever. Both of them could see that Lei Xingfeng was much younger than them. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, I'm Lei Xingfeng. You can call me a Feng. Bai Zhua pondered for a moment and said, I've always had a question in my heart. Can you answer it for me? Hai Yingjian also stared at Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng knew what they wanted to know. He said indifferently, "Please speak." Bai Zhuo said, "What level have you advanced to now? This, your true body, is very different from ours. Why is that?" Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "That's 2 questions." Bai Zhuo said, "Yes, that's 2 questions. Can you answer me?" Hai Yingjian also said, "I'm curious too." Lei Xingfeng said, "Dao Saint." Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian were both stunned. The 2 of them muttered, "Dao Saint level? What level is this? How come I've never heard of it?" Lei Xingfeng said, "It's normal that you haven't heard of it. This is not our level. It's what the outside world calls it. When a cultivator reaches the Dao Saint level, they have broken through our peak monarch level." Both of their eyes shone with brilliance. Ever since they reached the pinnacle level, they were stuck at this juncture. They didn't know how to cultivate further. After wasting countless years, they were about to be worn down by time. If they could take another step forward, then it would be a whole new world. Bai Zhuo said, "You're Dao Saint?" Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "That's right." Hai Yingjian said, How do we cultivate to reach the Dao Saint level?" Lei Xingfeng smiled and didn't answer. Both of their faces turned bitter. This kind of cultivation technique, how could he be willing to teach them? After a while, Bai Zhuo said How about we make a deal? I don't ask for a cultivation technique. I just want a path. Lei Xingfeng's heart moved. He knew how wealthy Ming-Zhe alliance was. They occupied many mines and continents. They had a huge population and all kinds of resources. Hai Yingjian also said, "As long as we have it, we won't be stingy." Lei Xingfeng said, "I know the path of cultivation, but I don't know the specific cultivation technique. What I cultivate is very unique. You can't learn it." Bai Zhuo said, "Why can't we learn it?" Lei Xingfeng said, "It requires a higher level of restriction knowledge than a restriction grandmaster, especially spatial restrictions." Do you think you can do it?" The 2 of them were dumbfounded. The Ming-Zhe alliance did have a restriction grandmaster, but a restriction grandmaster who was more powerful than a restriction grandmaster required a lot of knowledge. It was like comparing a postdoc to a top scientist who had won countless awards. The difference between the 2 was huge. Bai Zhuo said, "All right, then what's the other path?" Then he realized and said, "I'm old and confused. Right, can we make a deal? As long as you point out a path, the specific cultivation technique, we can't think of it. If there's a path, we can at least explore it." Lei Xingfeng pondered for a moment and said, "I can make a deal, but what do you have that's worth it?" Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian were hesitant. Lei Xingfeng had such a high cultivation, what would he need? The 2 of them had accumulated many treasures over the years. But Lei Xingfeng was a Dao Saint expert. Who knew what he needed? Hai Yingjian reacted quickly and said, "Let's not guess. Let Lord Lei make a list. Let's see what we can find." Lei Xingfeng said, "No need to call me Lord Lei. Just call me a phone." Actually, Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian didn't care about the title. They were just very polite at the start. Hai Yingjian nodded, "All right, a phone." Bai Zhuo also said, "That's good too. A phone. Can you make a list of the star Python records?" Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and said, "All right." Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian revealed expressions of ecstasy. As long as they agreed to the trade, it meant that Xian Phone was willing to guide them. To the 2 of them, resources and materials didn't matter. The entire Ming-Zhe alliance was for them to squander. As long as there was a list, unless the item on the list couldn't be found, then there was nothing they could do. As long as there was, the 2 of them would definitely be able to get it. Even if they had to steal, rob, kill, or burn, they wouldn't hesitate. Lei Xingfeng made a list and handed it to Bai Zhuo. Bai Zhuo hurriedly took a look and was stunned. He said, This. Hai Yingjian said, "What's wrong? Is it a rare material that we haven't seen before?" Bai Zhuo said, "No, it's not." As he spoke, he quickly skimmed through the list. It was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing. Hai Yingjian couldn't help but grab the Star Python record. He glanced at it and was stunned. He said, "Is this for real?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Yes. It's just that we need a lot of them." Bai Zhuo's eyes flashed with excitement. Hai Yingjian put down the Star Python records and said, "We can do this." The quantity is easy. The star python records that Lei Xingfeng gave had all the materials from low, mid, and high level. They were all owned by the Ming-Zhe Alliance. There wasn't a single rare material or treasure. They were all materials that the cultivators of the hidden sect urgently needed. Especially the low-level materials, they were very scarce. Because Lei Xingfeng was the one in charge of the hidden sect's mineral veins, and he had high standards, he didn't care about normal mineral veins. This caused the hidden sect's low-level materials to be scarce. Instead, they had more mid and high-level materials. Of course, this was still not enough. With such a powerful Ming-Zhe alliance, these materials were really nothing. That was why Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian lost their composure. They didn't think that Lei Xingfeng would trade these things. The two of them weren't sure if they had other materials, but from the list of materials recorded in the Star Python records, they were 100% sure that the Ming-Zhe alliance had a lot of them. This meant that this trade would definitely succeed. Bai Zhuo rubbed his hands and said, "The quantity is easy. And I'll go first." As he spoke, he marked the quantity on the list. After that, he handed it to Hai Yingjian and said, "Take a look. Is there anything you can add?" Hai Yingjian picked up the Star Python records. After checking it, he changed a few numbers and said, "A phone. What do you think?" Lei Xingfeng took a look, and his eyes almost popped out. This was too scary. The quantity was at a level that he didn't even dare to imagine. He immediately knew that these two people wouldn't negotiate. However, he didn't take the opportunity to continue extorting because the quantity was huge. It was enough for the hidden sect to use for a long time. This quantity was really scary. For example, for some high-level materials, with Lei Xingfeng's knowledge, it was considered good if the quantity was 2 or 3 digits. Here, 5 digits was more than 10,000. This was too rich. He frowned as he looked, but his heart was blooming with joy. Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian looked at Lei Xingfeng nervously. They were afraid that he would refuse. Bai Zhuo said, "And if you're not satisfied, we can add another 10% or 20%. Lei Xingfeng said, "There's no need to add more. This much is enough. However, I have to receive the goods first." Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian smiled. Bai Zhuo said, "No problem. We could deliver the goods first." This was the benefit of dealing with the highest level of the other party. They could make a deal. There was no need to discuss. Then, the entire Ming-Zhe alliance started to move. As the quantity was too large, Bai Zhuo specially ordered people to clear out a large space. A large number of people came in and released the items from the hidden lens space. Lei Xingfeng waited at the side. When the space was filled with items, he went forward. He didn't even check the quantity and just kept it in the mirror world. Then, the people of the Ming-Zhe alliance continued to release the items. After working for 10 days, they finally kept all the materials on the list in the mirror world. The three of them returned to the pavilion. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Since you guys are so straightforward, I won't be stingy. I will try my best to answer your questions." Bai Zhuo and Hai Yingjian smiled. Bai Zhuo said, "If you want to reach the Tao Saint level, what do you cultivate?" Lei Xingfeng said seriously, "You are a fire seal. If you want to reach the Tao Saint level, you have to cultivate a new fire seal. On the basis of the original fire seal, you have to cultivate a new fire seal, which is a double fire seal. Once you succeed, you will succeed." Chapter 831. Bai Zhuo was stunned. After a while, he said, "What? It's that simple?" Lei Xingfeng said, "This is not simple." Bai Zhuo said, "How do I do it?" Lei Xingfeng said, "I don't know how to do it exactly." "Well, don't worry. There are a few conditions that must be met. First, your fire seal should have reached the peak, but it is not enough. The fire seal needs fire phase. With fire phase, you can cultivate the second seal and save a lot of trouble. Second, there must be a certain balance between the two fire seals. If the balance is not done well, it means that the restriction in the new fire seal is not good. It will be very difficult to cultivate this fire seal. Third, when the second fire seal is formed, there must also be fire phase in it. Otherwise, it will be digested and absorbed by the first seal, which is your original seal. Fourth, the most important point is that the two seals are connected and relatively independent. They must form an energy cycle. Once this cycle is established, the cultivation is basically successful. Lei Xingfeng said 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Baizhua and Hai Yingjian were dumbfounded. The conditions were not harsh, but the cultivation was not as simple as they thought. Baizhua said, "There are fire phase, but how do I keep them in the fire seal? I tried before, but fire phase could not go in." Lei Xingfeng said, "It can only be tempted, not forced. This is the principle of using seals to keep phase." Baizhua smiled bitterly. "What do we use to tempt them?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Fire-type energy crystals or supreme-grade crystals. They are the phase favorite energy." There were countless types of energy crystals. Some were natural, some were man-made, and some were refined by experts. There were also attribute crystals, such as the Big Thunder Crystal, Red Fire Crystal, and the like. There were also naturally nurtured supreme-grade crystals, such as stalagmites. There were so many of them that even cultivators might not be able to figure them out. Some crystals were not known before coming into contact with them. Anyway, Lei Xingfeng had come into contact with countless crystals and had long forgotten about them. Baizhua said, "There are supreme-grade crystals, but there are very few of them." Hai Yingjian's expression turned ugly as he said, "Where am I going to find an ice-type Fey?" As there were many fire attribute cultivators, there were naturally many fire attribute materials. Therefore, Baizhua had already obtained fire attribute Feys. However, Hai Yingjian was having a hard time. Ice attribute Feys were already extremely rare. Furthermore, Hai Yingjian had never intentionally wanted to obtain ice attribute Feys. Therefore, it was a huge problem for him to cultivate the second ice seal. Lei Xingfeng said, "There are two ways. One is to find someone to trade. The Mingzhe alliance is so big, and someone might have collected an ice-type Fey. You just don't know about it. Think of a way. You are the Mingzhe alliance's old ancestor. Ask your subordinates to find one. One is to go out and search by myself. It would be best to find a place similar to the icebound continent. Such a cold place might give birth to ice-type Feys." Hai Yingjian was a little anxious as he said, "All right, let's put this problem aside first. I didn't think that Feys would be so useful." As Lei Xingfeng had obtained a huge amount of materials and didn't provide a real cultivation technique, he felt a little guilty. He said, "If you can't find an ice-type Fey, then you can temporarily use a water-type Fey as a substitute. The key is to advance to the Dao Saint tier. If there isn't a Fey in the seal, it will be very difficult to evolve." Hai Yingjian said, "Water-type Feys will work too?" Water-type and ice-type Feys might be similar, but it was much easier to find water-type Feys. Just like fire-type Feys, there were many fire-type Feys in this world, so there were many fire-type Feys. It was the same for wood-type Feys. Feys that were harder to nurture were metal-type, dark-type, light-type, and the most difficult was space-type. This was also one of the reasons why Lei Xingfeng wanted to trick Little Kong into joining Lei Yi no matter what. The rarer the Fey, the greater the effect. Compared to ice-type and water-type Feys, water-type Feys were easier to obtain, while ice-type Feys were harder to obtain. Using water-type Feys as opposed to ice-type Feys was a far cry, but it was better than nothing. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Yes, but it won't be as good as ice-type ones, but it is better than nothing." Hai Yingjian agreed and said, "That's true. It is better than nothing. And I got it. As far as I know, there are people in the Mingzhe alliance who have water-type Feys. I will go in exchange for them." Baizhua asked a few more questions, and Lei Xingfeng answered them in great detail. Lei Xingfeng was very responsible for this. Although he didn't have any cultivation techniques, he pointed out the right direction. With Baizhua and Hai Yingjian's super strength and rich cultivation experience, the possibility of success was very high. As they conversed, Lei Xingfeng gradually understood that these two weren't ordinary people. To be able to cultivate to the highest level in the Mingzhe alliance, they were cultivation talents with excellent aptitude and potential. Hai Yingjian also had a lot of questions. This opportunity was exchanged with a lot of materials, and neither of them would waste it. He also asked a lot of questions, some of which even Lei Xingfeng couldn't think of. After verifying with his own Lei Yin, Lei Xingfeng's train of thought was opened up. Gradually, as the conversation deepened, it became a conversation between both parties. Bai Zhuo and Hai Yinjian's cultivation experience was very rich, so Lei Xingfeng also asked some questions. After getting detailed answers from the two, he also gained a lot. This trade was really worth it. Of course, Bai Zhuo and Hai Yinjian also felt that they had gained a lot. They both felt that this trade was worth it and was very worth it. This made both parties very satisfied. Lei Xingfeng didn't just get a lot of materials in this trade. He also got a lot of cultivation experience from the two's conversation. This was very important to him. One had to know that he had cultivated directly from a high-level sovereign king to a Dao sage. In fact, he was still a step away, so Lei Yin's cultivation wasn't perfect. He still needed some guidance. And Lei Xingfeng didn't know how to do this work. After talking with the two peak sovereign kings, he understood a lot. At least, like Bai Zhuo and Hai Yinjian, he also found a cultivation path. With this cultivation train of thought, when he cultivated again, he knew which direction to work towards. He didn't have to fumble around by himself. The efficiency of the two was completely different. This conversation lasted for a total of 10 days. In between, they rested for 2 days and had a meal before the exchange ended. Lei Xingfeng directly opened the mirror realm and left in front of them. The two of them were shocked. One had to know that there were seals here, and they couldn't open the secret door at all. It wasn't until a long time later that the two of them found out that Lei Xingfeng used to work in the Mingzhe Alliance, and that he was a seal grandmaster expert. Of course, this was also because Lei Xingfeng had signed up and left behind an image. This allowed people who knew him to know how high he had reached, and that he had made a deal with the old ancestor of the Mingzhe Alliance. Lei Xingfeng returned to the mirror realm. The materials he obtained this time caused a stir in the secret door. One had to know how difficult it was for low-level disciples to find suitable cultivation materials. They didn't expect Lei Xingfeng to obtain so much this time. Wu Yang and the others were in the wooden shed in the courtyard. Everyone was waiting for Lei Xingfeng to return. When they saw Lei Xingfeng emerge from the courtyard, everyone cheered. Even though they knew that Lei Xingfeng was strong, they were still worried that he would enter the Mingzhe Alliance headquarters alone. Seeing that Lei Xingfeng had returned safely, everyone's hearts calmed down. Lei Xingfeng said, "We made a big profit this time." Haha. However, the two old fellows of the Mingzhe Alliance didn't lose out either. I reckon that the Mingzhe Alliance will develop greatly. Once Bai Zhuo and Hai Yinjian advanced, even if only one of them advanced, the expansion of the Mingzhe Alliance would become inevitable. The existence of top experts was a strategic weapon for a force or sect. If these people were to fight, their role would be irreplaceable. Just like this time, when Lei Xingfeng entered the Mingzhe Alliance, only Bai Zhuo and Hai Yinjian could deal with him and successfully reach a deal. Not only did they obtain a cultivation path, but their greatest victory was that they successfully reached an agreement with an expert who could destroy the Mingzhe Alliance. Thus, the Mingzhe Alliance was saved. During this period, no matter what price the Mingzhe Alliance had to pay, it was worth it. Even if Lei Xingfeng didn't make the deal, they would still find an excuse to make the deal. Even if the materials were given away for free, they would still be willing to pay. The most profound reason wasn't for the deal, but to protect the Mingzhe Alliance. Lei Xingfeng only understood after a long time that even if they didn't give him the cultivation path, he would still be able to obtain the cultivation materials. However, Lei Xingfeng didn't regret it. Moreover, he didn't really want to destroy the Mingzhe Alliance. No matter what, such a human alliance was a human force and not an alien force. Even though he understood this point, Lei Xingfeng wasn't angry. He couldn't help but feel that these two old fellows were really cunning. No wonder they didn't hold anything back when they gave him pointers. They really said whatever they wanted to say. They even told Lei Xingfeng about the various tricks and techniques that they cultivated. Lei Xingfeng was rather moved back then. It was because of the two's pointers that Lei Xingfeng was able to make certain modifications to his Lei Yin. Due to the phase and Shao Kong, it was much easier to modify the Lei Yin. According to the two's teachings, Lei Xingfeng's Lei Yin had indeed become stronger than before. It could be said that the single seal's power had increased by a huge margin. Wu Yang said, "The materials in the warehouse were all obtained from this deal." Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Of course. Otherwise, where would we get so many materials?" Gucci looked as though he had struck a fortune and said, "All the empty warehouses have been filled up. There are also many piles outside. Now, there's a large group of people counting the materials. This time, the materials will really allow our secret sect to develop greatly." Many newbies in the secret sect were suffering from a lack of materials. It was very difficult for them to improve their cultivation, especially in the early stages. It was even more so for the secret sect's upper echelons. Chapter 832. The materials that Lei Xingfeng obtained this time finally solved the most basic needs of the secret sect's disciples. Even if it was lacking, it was very limited. This laid a very good foundation for the secret sect. Because of this, the secret sect's cultivators had the possibility of rapid development. Only with a solid foundation could it be possible to produce experts. Because the secret sect had never given up on ordinary people, its foundation was not lost. Every year, ordinary people's children would step into the ranks of cultivators. This ensured that the secret sect's legacy would not be cut off. Whether it was Wu Yang, Gucci, Lei Xingfeng, or Thunderstorm, they were all very attentive towards the development of the secret sect. Lei Xingfeng was mainly responsible for looking for veins outside and collecting various materials at the same time. Wu Yang and the others were responsible for training the disciples, providing all kinds of help and support, and organizing people to excavate various ores and materials. The entire secret sect was a sect with a clear division of labor. This time, they obtained a large amount of materials from the Mingzhe Alliance. A large number of middle and low-level cultivators had enough materials, so it was relatively easier for them to cultivate. This was especially true for cultivators who were stuck on materials. Once they had the right materials, they could quickly advance. Therefore, a large number of cultivators in the secret sect who were stuck at bottlenecks would be able to advance smoothly because of this batch of materials. This time, Lei Xingfeng's contribution was the greatest. He also solved the entire secret sect's biggest problem. Wu Yang laughed. "This saves me a lot of worry." Gucci said, "Yes, I've already ordered everyone to retreat and stay in the mirror realm to cultivate. No one is allowed to go out for the time being." Wu Yang nodded. "Yes, we have to prepare for the big migration again. There are also a few production bases. When you are about to leave, we will gather them and return to the mirror realm. Then, we will wait for you to depart." Lei Xingfeng laughed. "There's no rush. There's still some time. There's no need to rush to seal the mirror realm. Middle and high-level cultivators can still go to the big crack. However, this time, we have to organize and not move separately. Try to avoid outsiders as much as possible. In the last battle, we killed a lot of outsiders. They are very vengeful. Once we encounter them, immediately organize a retreat." Wu Yang said, "All right, I will personally go to the big crack to cultivate." Intermediate and advanced cultivators would also obtain a large amount of materials. If they had a suitable place to cultivate, then their advancement would be just around the corner. This was especially true for the big crack, which was especially suitable for intermediate and advanced cultivators. The effect was much better than cultivating in the mirror world. Lei Xingfeng said, "I'll go to the crack this time as well." He knew that the speed and quality of cultivation in the crack were very high, and he didn't know why the effects were so good. The only thing he didn't know was that he had reached Dao Saint Realm and hadn't cultivated in the crack before, so he didn't know what the effects were. Wu Yang suddenly became excited and said, "It's great that a phone can go. With you, everyone will be safer." If Lei Xingfeng went with them, it would be equivalent to giving these people insurance. Whether it was outsiders, star beasts, or even other cultivators, it would not be a big problem. With him protecting everyone, it was better than anything else. Gucci said, "All right, I'll organize it." Gao Yi said, "I'll go too." Lei Xingfeng said, "I'll go back to my room to rest. Call me when you're ready." Everyone went to prepare. Lei Xingfeng went back to his room and closed the door. He sat down and began to think. With his habit, he would immediately try to digest and absorb the knowledge that he obtained. Therefore, once he was free, he would try to learn and practice. This was already his habit. He had only thought about the knowledge about seals that he had obtained from Baizhua and Hai Yinjian. Now, he needed to study it thoroughly. At the same time, he began to test and absorb it bit by bit. If it was useful, he would not hesitate to use it on his Lei Yin. Every change meant a little improvement. Lei Xingfeng would not let go of any slight changes. He had to make his Lei Yin perfect. He vaguely understood that the most basic seal was his own Lei Yin. This Lei Yin was his foundation. The other Lei Yin should not exceed this seal. Otherwise, it would be difficult to grasp. Baizhua and Hai Yinjian were both peak stage monarchs. They had stayed there for a long time. With regards to seals at this level, the two of them had a deep understanding. It could be said that just by giving some pointers to Lei Xingfeng, they would be able to help him greatly. Moreover, Lei Xingfeng's Lei Yin had not reached the peak yet. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng's understanding and design of the peak stage monarch seal was like a treasure to him. He seriously recorded Baizhua and Hai Yinjian's words and tried his best to understand and verify them. Then, he would slowly embody them on his Lei Yin. This also involved the thunder attribute Fei, the spatial Fei, little sky, and the various restrictions that were automatically produced by the Lei Yin. The complexity was enough to drive Lei Xingfeng crazy. Every time he thought of something, he would slowly verify and set it up until he succeeded or failed. Every success would double his confidence. Even if he failed occasionally, he wouldn't think much of it. Fortunately, Lei Xingfeng had only connected one Lei Yin. Therefore, there was still a possibility of changes. Even so, it had increased his burden. This was because the changes to one Lei Yin would definitely affect the connected Lei Yin. There were both good and bad reactions. Overall, the good side greatly outweighed the bad side. This gave Lei Xingfeng the confidence to persevere. Time passed quickly as he pondered, and experimented repeatedly. On this day, Thunderstorm came to inform Lei Xingfeng. A phone. They've already gone to the big crack. Do you want to go too? Lei Xingfeng said, Okay, let's go together. Many people from the hidden sect went this time. When Lei Xingfeng and Thunderstorm arrived, they saw tents connected together and set up without any cover. Lei Xingfeng was dumbfounded. You can do this? People can see it from afar. Feng Qinzong said, You're here, aren't you? A phone. We're relying on you for safety. Lei Xingfeng smiled bitterly and shook his head. Do you really think I'm invincible? Even if I were, I wouldn't be able to take care of everyone. If someone ambushes us, we'll all die. Even if I kill them all, our people won't be able to survive. After thinking about it, Lei Xingfeng began to set up restrictions. They needed to be protected by restrictions, or else they wouldn't even have a place to escape. With their strength, they might be able to survive in the hidden sect, but this was the big crack. Not only were there human experts, even outsiders were experts. As for star beasts and whatnot, it was needless to say. Lei Xingfeng, Wu Yang, Gu Qi, Thunderstorm, and Gao Yi, the higher-ups of the hidden sect, didn't have to worry. Someone had already set up the final tents and even built a large wooden shed for Lei Xingfeng. It was a circular, illusory formation with a spatial restriction. Anyone who walked in would be instantly teleported to another place. If they entered from here, they would quickly reappear 100 kilometers away. In other words, this restriction had no lethality. It was only there to prevent others from finding them. With Lei Xingfeng's arrangement, this place became a camp with restrictions. Since it was a camp and protected by restrictions, Wu Yang also brought some low-level disciples from the Mirror Realm. They were the best among the low-level disciples, allowing them to improve quickly, arranging for patrols, sentries, people to be on duty, and experts to take turns to be in charge. The matters of the hidden sect were complicated and complicated. However, this didn't have much to do with Lei Xingfeng. He only needed to be in charge of the bigger aspects, such as the restrictions. If there was an invasion, that would be his mission. Other things wouldn't bother him. Therefore, after Lei Xingfeng finished setting up the restrictions, He returned to his tent and continued the unfinished task at home, which was to cultivate his Lei-yin. In addition to Lei-yin, there was also a trick to cultivating the true body. With Lei Xingfeng's previous level, he would use whatever true body Lei-yin released. His control of the true body was limited to its size, but he had never focused on its power and defense. In other words, Lei Xingfeng's true body was naked. There was nothing attached to it. According to Bai Zhua, it was a waste. It was a waste of such a huge true body. If Lei Xingfeng could cultivate the true body, his strength could increase by 30% and his defense by 40%. Forming the true body lightning armor, or rather, the true body lightning armor, could greatly increase Lei Xingfeng's defense. The true body's arms could also be turned into weapons. The same went for the legs and torso. Once it was cultivated successfully, whether it was the palms, arms, elbows, or shoulders, they could all be turned into weapons. However, these were all small tricks for cultivation. They couldn't be compared to real leveling up. For example, if you were proficient in these methods, but you were a level lower than someone else, no matter how much you leveled up, you wouldn't be as strong as the other person leveling up. This kind of cultivation experience could only be obtained by people like Bai Zhua, who had reached the peak of cultivation and couldn't make any further progress. Usually, in order to improve his combat strength, he would spend a long time cultivating. Now, all the experience he gained was given to Lei Xingfeng. As long as a cultivator could still level up, they generally wouldn't ponder over this kind of technique. They also wouldn't specially imagine and verify it. In the end, it would become a part of their strength. Once the Lei-yin was modified, one would need to cultivate for a while to verify if there were any mistakes. If there were any mistakes, one would have to correct them. If there were no mistakes, one would have to continue. This was very time-consuming. Lei Xingfeng had no choice but to do this once. In terms of cultivation, he had taken many shortcuts. Lei-yin had many hidden dangers. With this modification, he gradually changed this Lei-yin. With the help of Shao Kong and the lightning-type phase, his Lei-yin was becoming stronger and more perfect. Once Lei Xingfeng continued to connect with Lei-yin, when there were 3 Lei-yin together, it would be very difficult for him to change it. This was also one of the reasons why he wasn't willing to connect with the next Lei-yin. Another reason was that his cultivation wasn't enough. Forcefully connecting with Lei-yin would be problematic. Chapter 833. Due to Shao Kong, Lei-yin had a lot more spatial restrictions, which also allowed Lei-yin to have a certain spatial attribute. As he understood more about spatial restrictions, Lei Xingfeng became more and more fascinated. He liked the power of spatial restrictions very much. This thing was even more ferocious than lightning and could even ignore the difference in grade. In this world, lightning-type cultivators were relatively rare, but there were quite a number of people who cultivated lightning-type. Thunder-type cultivators could be seen occasionally, but Lei Xingfeng had never seen any cultivators with spatial, light, and other rare attributes. It was simply too rare. Due to the fact that spatial attributes had so many benefits, Lei Xingfeng had kept Shao Kong and Lei-yin. However, because Shao Kong had intelligence, he had no choice but to go to the magnetic storm mountain range and strengthen his own Lei-yin. He wanted the lightning-type Fei in Lei-yin to grow faster. Currently, under the suppression of Lei Xingfeng, the 2 Feis had formed a fragile balance. This balance allowed Lei-yin to be of great use. When the lightning-type Fei had intelligence, Lei-yin's balance would truly be achieved. At that time, even if Lei Xingfeng's strength didn't advance, it would still increase by 30 to 50%. In other words, its true body's power would become even stronger. After cultivating to the Dao Saint tier, Lei Xingfeng understood that the most important thing in Lei-yin was balance. When one Lei-yin was stacked and became 2 Lei-yin, balance would become extremely important. Once 3 Lei-yin were stacked, the balance would be even harder to control. It was no wonder that it needed a Fei. If it relied on the owner's strength, it wouldn't be possible to constantly pay attention to the balance in Lei-yin. It needed something to stand guard, and a Fei was the best choice. Feis would instinctively build their own home. When the seal became their home, They would explode with great enthusiasm and persevere in building their own home. This was how the seal developed. This change was magical. Every time Lei Xingfeng looked at Lei Yin, he would click his tongue in wonder. Shao Kong would occasionally occupy more space and sometimes force Lei Xingfeng to control it. If he left it alone, Lei Xingfeng suspected that the entire Lei Yin would become a spatial seal. Lei Xingfeng wasn't willing to do this. Therefore, it was actually very dangerous to keep Shao Kong and Lei Yin. In a large crack, there were constantly people who had successfully advanced. A large number of mid-grade and low-grade cultivators had advanced. Some disciples with good aptitudes and potential were especially smart and diligent. They had even advanced continuously. Of course, there was a reason for this advancement. Many disciples were on the verge of advancing. After accumulating for a long time, they would have broken through under normal circumstances. However, because they couldn't gather the materials to advance, they were stuck and couldn't move. When they had enough materials, advancing was a very simple matter. Lei Xingfeng's current cultivation process was the process of adjusting the formation of restrictions in Lei Yin and the process of testing the restrictions. There was also the process of energy circulation. Once a restriction was formed and activated, the flow of energy and the operation of the restriction were all things that happened during the cultivation process. Every time he cultivated, a batch of restrictions would be formed. Cultivators who didn't understand restrictions wouldn't be able to control this process. They would feel that after cultivating, the seal would become stronger, and they would also become stronger. As for why they would become stronger, they wouldn't be able to control it. Lei Xingfeng was proficient in restrictions. In addition, he had a pair of special eyes. In addition to feeling, he could also directly see the changes in Lei Yin. Therefore, he knew exactly what was happening when Lei Yin was cultivating. Every time he cultivated, he would discover that a lot of restrictions would appear. Among these restrictions, some were good, some were ordinary, and there were even restrictions that didn't have a good effect. This required Lei Xingfeng to adjust and remove the bad restrictions. This required the use of spiritual items to maintain the good restrictions. If it wasn't necessary, Lei Xingfeng would remove the ordinary restrictions. If it was necessary, he would modify it. Gradually, the entire Lei Yin became more reasonable. In the beginning, Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to touch the Lei Yin that was connected. Especially the Lei Yin that was connected was abnormally strong. In the beginning, Lei Xingfeng only dared to affect the Lei Yin. Recently, after Shao Kong joined the Lei Yin, his Lei Yin also began to become stronger. Especially with the spatial restriction, his Lei Yin had dual attributes. Although the spatial restriction was an auxiliary restriction in the Lei Yin, the entire Lei Yin was different with the spatial restriction. This was how he was able to completely suppress the connected Lei Yin. In the past few days, Lei Xingfeng finished modifying his Lei Yin and made it more powerful. Only then did he start to study the connected Lei Yin. The restrictions in this Lei Yin were 100 times more complicated than Lei Xingfeng's Lei Yin. The first time he checked, Lei Xingfeng's eyes almost popped out. This level of complexity was something that Lei Xingfeng had never expected. It was really layered and countless. This also allowed Lei Xingfeng to take a peek at what the real Lei Yin was like. Lei Xingfeng still didn't have the ability to cultivate the connected Lei Yin. This was because this Lei Yin's grade was much higher than Lei Xingfeng's. However, with Shao Kong and other Feis, he could slightly change this Lei Yin. At the very least, he could make this Lei Yin interact with his own Lei Yin. This was mainly due to Shao Kong's efforts. Shao Kong was very strong. In addition, it was a spatial Fei. When it entered this Lei Yin, it was inevitable that it would suppress the original Lei Yin's Fei. However, the complexity of the entire Lei Yin was far beyond Lei Xingfeng's imagination. Therefore, connecting with the next Lei Yin was still far away. For the time being, Lei Xingfeng still couldn't deal with the connected Lei Yin. How could he continue to connect with Lei Yin? It was impossible for him to have 3 true ring bodies now. Lei Xingfeng sighed inwardly. I can't rush it. Indeed, it couldn't be rushed. After a long period of cultivation and adjustment, Lei Xingfeng knew that this was the case of slow work producing fine work. This was especially true for the connected Lei Yin. Not only did he have to familiarize himself with the restrictions, but he also had to think of a way to modify it. He had to eliminate the unnecessary restrictions and install the restrictions that he needed. This Lei Yin had too many high-level restrictions. With Lei Xingfeng's current strength, he couldn't use them at all. These restrictions also consumed a large amount of energy, which was something he couldn't tolerate. The high-level restrictions in the Lei Yin were very complicated compound restrictions. The more he studied them, the more Lei Xingfeng admired them. He couldn't believe that the owner of this Lei Yin would die in a restriction. It was simply unbelievable. This person was truly too strong. This made Lei Xingfeng very vigilant. If such a person could die in a restriction, then he definitely couldn't be arrogant in the future. He reckoned that when this person died, he would definitely be sullen to the point of madness. It was a pity that this person probably didn't understand restrictions. From his Lei Yin, it could be seen that there were actually more than 30% of the restrictions that were useless or bad. In order to eliminate these bad or useless restrictions, Lei Xingfeng had to spend a lot of energy. This Lei Yin really fascinated Lei Xingfeng. Just the restrictions alone were more than 100,000. However, the restrictions in his Lei Yin were less than 20,000. Of course, as he cultivated and as time passed, this number was still rapidly increasing. However, compared to the connected Lei Yin, the gap was not small. The other person's bad and useless restrictions were more than the restrictions in all of Lei Xingfeng's Lei Yin. As he analyzed and investigated, Lei Xingfeng was shocked again and again. This Lei Yin allowed Lei Xingfeng to see a new world and learn a lot of things. In particular, his understanding of restrictions deepened. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng's first step was to slowly use his Lei Yin to assimilate the connected Lei Yin. He even used Shao Kong to block most of the restrictions in the Lei Yin. This was the power of spatial restrictions. It could cut off a portion of restrictions. This way, Lei Xingfeng only needed to affect a portion of the restrictions. When this portion of restrictions was assimilated with the restrictions in his Lei Yin, Lei Xingfeng would then release the rest of the restrictions. This was using the method of nibbling away, transforming Lei Yin bit by bit. Lei Xingfeng believed that it would not be long before this Lei Yin was completely assimilated by him. Of course, if this Lei Yin was cultivated by himself, then this problem would not exist. However, this was someone else's Lei Yin, so Lei Xingfeng had to go through a lot of trouble. The training this time was of great help to Xian Feng. He was able to recognize many problems and also answered some of the questions he had in his heart. Along with the knowledge by Zhuo and Hai Yinjian imparted to him, he was able to raise his lightning stamp. During this period of time, he had also used up a large amount of materials and energy crystals. Any movement in the Lei Yin was inseparable from the support of energy crystals. Even the spirit items consumed a lot of energy. In the later stages, Lei Xingfeng even wanted to go to the fantasy sky realm. The main reason was that the materials and energy consumed were too much, forcing him to continue to search for resources. No wonder there were so few high-level cultivators. The resources that were hard to obtain limited a lot of people. Even if he had the aptitude and potential to cultivate to a higher level, the lack of resources would often cause him to be stuck in the path of cultivation. Even Lei Xingfeng felt a headache from the amount of resources he needed to cultivate alone. It was too much. If it were not for the support of the secret door, so many people excavating it, and his own hard work, it would not be enough. Of the stalagmites he obtained last time, he had used up 3 stalagmites this time. After removing the stone shell, 1 stalagmite could obtain a lot of crystals. Just 1 cultivation session had consumed 3 stalagmites and a lot of other materials. Lei Xingfeng sighed inwardly. He reckoned that some high-level cultivators would not dare to cultivate casually. Once the materials and energy crystals could not keep up, not only would the cultivation not have any effect, but it would also create a bad restriction. This was something that would make people collapse. The biggest result of this cultivation session was that it allowed the two Lei Yin to have more connections. Some of the restrictions on each other also interacted with each other. He used Shao Kong to block some restrictions that he could not use for the time being. At the same time, many new restrictions were created in the Lei Yin. The overall strength had improved to a certain extent. This was a real improvement, not a sudden increase in strength. That kind of strength was more superficial, and Lei Xingfeng could not really control it. Lei Xingfeng had a completely new look until now. Chapter 834. Standing in the center of the fantasy sky realm again, Lei Xingfeng looked at the restrictions here and had a new understanding. He now knew that whether it was breaking through by force or using the gaps in the restrictions, he was very confident. Due to his deeper understanding of restrictions, the restrictions here no longer had the mysterious feeling they had before. In Lei Xingfeng's eyes, the restrictions here had become very simple. He began to look for restrictions that no one had broken through before. These restrictions often contained all kinds of good things. Of course, if someone had broken through a restriction, Lei Xingfeng would directly give up. No matter whether the cultivator had obtained a treasure or not, this restriction was not worth the effort. Fortunately, Lei Xingfeng was proficient in restrictions. With just a casual glance, he could tell whether this restriction had been broken or not. This was nothing to him, so he could save a lot of time. Useless efforts were the most time-consuming. Lei Xingfeng observed for a moment and found that there were basically no restrictions in this area that had survived. All of them had been broken through. Some had broken through by force, some had destroyed them, and some had broken through but were forced to retreat. He could clearly speculate. Give up, and keep on giving up. Lei Xingfeng ran all the way down. He felt strange. In this large area, he couldn't find a single restriction that hadn't been broken through. Which bastard did this? It would be good to leave a few restrictions here and there. Soon, Lei Xingfeng came to the edge of cliff. The terrain here was very strange. Many of them appeared very abruptly. For example, this cliff had a deep ditch in the middle. The bottom couldn't be seen, and there was a series of restrictions on the edge of the cliff. It was the same on the opposite cliff. When he came to the edge of the restriction, this restriction had also been broken through. However, it was quickly retreated. It could be seen that many people had broken through, but it seemed that they couldn't go any further and retreated. The restriction on the opposite cliff obviously hadn't been touched. In other words, the restriction here had blocked everyone. No one could reach the opposite cliff. There was a huge crack in the middle of the two cliffs, which was about 100 to 500 meters apart. The crack was wide and narrow, and it was continuous. The most interesting thing was that it also extended, making it impossible for people to enter. Lei Xingfeng carefully observed for a moment. This was a very complicated restriction. The key point was that the level of illusion in this restriction was very high. Once one fell into it, they would not be able to distinguish the direction. They would probably fall down the cliff. Who knew what was at the bottom of the cliff? Therefore, as long as an experienced expert entered this trap-like restriction, they would be able to discover the insidious nature of this restriction. Lei Xingfeng was very interested in this restriction. He could see things that others could not. For example, this restriction used to be one, but after the ground cracked, it split into two. The most interesting thing was that after the split, the restriction became independent and developed separately. This was very similar to the restriction in the seal. It was the same in the seal. The type of restriction would grow, and it was mostly related to the attribute of the seal, as well as spiritual items. The reason why restrictions had top-quality materials, treasures, and even spiritual items was because of the restriction's needs. As time passed, they would slowly form. So naturally formed restrictions were the restrictions in the seal. Lei Xingfeng was increasingly clear about this point. It was said that this place was the remains of a cultivator. He also began to think that it was very possible. However, he did not dare to imagine such a huge shed. What kind of height did the cultivator have to reach to be able to do this? Since it was similar to the restriction in the seal, Lei Xingfeng found a basis. Whether it was true or not, and whether this deduction was correct or not, it did not prevent him from using this as a basis to deduce the restriction in this place. The veins were vaguely visible. However, Lei Xingfeng did not dare to be sure that this was the restriction in the seal. As he walked through the restriction, Lei Xingfeng's body underwent a wonderful change. When a restriction node bumped into him, it instantly disappeared. When Lei Xingfeng left that position, the restriction node mysteriously appeared again. This was a new skill that Lei Xingfeng had discovered. It used a method of spatial transposition to remove the possibility of the restriction's explosion. As his understanding of space deepened, and with Shao Kong's help, Lei Xingfeng could already use some extremely simple spatial techniques. It had to be said that the space attribute was very powerful. Lei Xingfeng admitted that if he encountered a space attribute cultivator, he would not have the confidence to fight, unless the opponent's level was much lower. Otherwise, it would be better to avoid them. Lei Xingfeng swaggered in. The entire restriction was unable to detect Lei Xingfeng's entry. It was as if he was a ghost, an illusory existence. Using the spatial technique for the first time, Lei Xingfeng was overjoyed. The effect was unbelievably good. The restriction was completely useless against him. This allowed him to move freely within the restriction. Spatial technique. Lei Xingfeng was very proud. He did not expect the spatial technique to be so useful. He did not even need to dodge the restriction nodes. He was directly teleported. Looking at the owner of the pagoda's 7th floor, Lei Yin, he was in awe of the space attribute and the skills that the spatial restriction brought. Spatial transposition. No matter what kind of attack it would all be converted. What was the use of it, even if it was powerful? Of course, Lei Xingfeng did not have this kind of large-scale spatial transposition skill. He had only just discovered it. The most basic spatial transposition skill could only convert restriction nodes. However, this basic skill allowed him to move freely within the restriction. Coming to the edge of the cliff, he moved forward and looked down. The restriction nodes in front of him were like dancing bees. They were densely packed and innumerable. Although the distance was short, no matter who it was, as long as they dared to fly, they would definitely trigger the restriction. Going down the cliff, it was also densely packed with restrictions. Lei Xingfeng was already interested. This time, he did not climb down. Instead, he flew down unscrupulously. Those be-like restriction nodes did not react at all. Lei Xingfeng quietly flew down. This was the first time Xianfeng dared to fly after entering the fantasy sky realm. Instantly, he felt his entire body relax and a feeling of freedom. This cliff was very deep. Lei Xingfeng's flying speed was not very fast. If he flew too fast, he would not be able to convert his spatial technique quickly. Otherwise, he would trigger the restriction. As he descended, looking at the densely packed restriction nodes, Lei Xingfeng could not help but shake his head. Even if he could see the restriction nodes clearly, it would be impossible for him to avoid them. His current method was still okay. He could directly convert the restriction nodes so that they would not be able to detect his existence. Lei Xingfeng secretly estimated the distance. 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. In the end, he could not even figure out how many 100 meters it was. He raised his head and looked up. The originally wide crack had become a thin line. It was really a thin line. Silver light flickered in his eyes. The restriction nodes around him were even denser. If he did not have the spatial transposition skill, he would not have been able to descend to this place. He would have been sent outside by the restriction or into a dangerous place. Then, he saw the hedgehog-like stalagmites below. Lei Xingfeng could see that the top-quality stalagmites he had obtained before were all over the place. Each stalagmite pointed upwards. It was as if countless huge elephant tusks were tied together and placed on the ground. Lei Xingfeng was startled at first. Then he was overjoyed. He lacked these top-quality energy crystals. Not only did he lack them, but the entire secret sect also lacked them. However, this place was filled with them. They were formed by the restriction. When the restriction grew, in order to ensure the operation of the restriction itself would also form stalagmites. Once the restriction was touched, the restriction would automatically judge. If the threat to the restriction was too great, the energy of the stalagmites would be quickly extracted to supplement the restriction, increasing the might of the restriction by several times. Lei Xingfeng landed on the ground and began to crazily collect stalagmites. Most of these high-quality energy crystals were top quality. Lei Xingfeng was really satisfied as he collected them along the way. He walked a few hundred meters before he finished collecting at one end. There were more on the other end. Lei Xingfeng turned around and continued to collect. This time, his harvest reached more than 7,000 top-quality stalagmites and tens of thousands of high-quality energy crystals. The stalagmites that contained high-quality energy crystals were sent into the Mirror Realm's warehouse in large quantities. Then, Lei Xingfeng flew up again and flew towards the other end of the cliff. He now knew that this restriction had not been activated on a large scale for a long time. When he arrived at the cliff, Lei Xingfeng looked back. He had been standing on the opposite side just now. Now, he had come over and had a good harvest. Soon, he walked out of the restriction. Lei Xingfeng guessed that this should be a new place with some restrictions around it. After careful inspection, Lei Xingfeng found that no one had been here before. It was probably blocked by the crack just now. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said to himself, "Very good. No one has been here before. Let's start collecting." He broke through one restriction after another. Due to his new skills and his powerful eyes, all kinds of treasures and top-quality materials appeared. This made Lei Xingfeng so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. This area was actually an unexplored treasure land. There were so many good things that even Lei Xingfeng was shocked. However, in the end, Lei Xingfeng found that there were no real treasures here. For example, he didn't find any spirit items or rare thunder attribute materials. These were what he needed. After coming out of a restriction formation, Lei Xingfeng's harvest was relatively small. He only found some high-quality materials. He saw another restriction not far away. He habitually walked in and walked all the way. Then, he entered an empty spot. Then, Lei Xingfeng saw two very beautiful trees. The trees weren't big. They were only as tall as two people and as thick as an arm. The branches and leaves were dark green, especially the leaves, which seemed to be carved from jade. One of the trees had scarlet fruits. The color was extremely bright. The fruits weren't big, but they were bright red like gems. On this tree, there were dozens of fruits. On the other tree, there was nothing. A wood attribute treasure. Chapter 835. Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to take it. This thing was alive, and he didn't know what to do. Lei Xingfeng knew more about wood element materials, so he didn't dare to act recklessly. He returned to the mirror world and immediately sent someone to inform Xi and Yao. Then, he brought Xi and Yao to the restriction. Xi and Yao saw the two trees and smiled. She said, "This is a treasure, but the good thing is this fruit. Let Xiao Ling pick it. We'll lose a lot if we pick it." Lin Ling flew out and pounced on the fruit. Xi and Yao immediately took out a wooden box made of ebony and placed it under the fruit. Lin Ling twisted it, and the fruit fell into the wooden box. Lei Xingfeng asked curiously, "What's the use of this fruit?" Xi and Yao said, "It strengthens the body. If it's mixed with medicine, the effect will be better. However, this thing has a special feature. Brother, you can try it, but don't eat too much. If you eat too much, your body will feel uncomfortable." Lei Xingfeng reached out to grab it, but Xi and Yao said, "Don't touch it with your hands. It'll break if you touch it." Then, Xi and Yao took out a wooden spoon and scooped a fruit. She sent it to Lei Xingfeng's mouth. Lei Xingfeng said, "Why is it so troublesome? Okay, I'll try it." He opened his mouth and bit the fruit. That red fruit melted as soon as it entered his mouth. An indescribable rich fragrance spread throughout his mouth. That unique fruit fragrance made him feel refreshed. Xi and Feng swallowed it in one gulp and smacked his lips. He exclaimed, "This taste, it's too fragrant and sweet. My whole body feels comfortable." Xi and Yao said, "This taste can stay in your mouth for at least 3 to 4 days." Then, she also ate a fruit. She closed her eyes and slowly swallowed it. That intoxicating taste made Lei Xingfeng laugh. He said, "Is it worth it?" After a while, Xi and Yao changed to another wooden box. She said, "Of course, if you put one in wine, hee. Brother probably won't say that." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Brewing wine or soaking wine?" Lei Xi and Yao smiled. "It's not just brewing wine, it's soaking wine. With just one pill and a large vat of wine, its taste will change from rotten to magical. Brother, you can try it in the future." As he said this, he handed Lei Xingfeng a wooden box and said, "There are 10 fruits inside. You can make 10 large vats of wine." Lei Xingfeng said, "How can 10 vats be enough? We need at least 20 vats." Lei Xingfeng said, "Okay, 20 vats it is." She handed a wooden box to Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng giggled as he received it and kept it in his hidden Luin space. Lei Xi and Yao said, "It's a pity that this tree can't be transplanted into the mirror world. Otherwise, I would have another collection." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Why can't it be transplanted?" Lei Xi and Yao said, "This tree needs a seal to maintain. It's very hard to grow." Others might not understand, but Lei Xingfeng understood. In other words, this tree was born from a seal. Without the seal, there wouldn't be such a tree. Lei Xingfeng said, "Wait, let me take a look." He began to observe the seal around them. After a while, he said, "I can set up the seal again, but if you want to transplant it, you'll need something else, right?" Lei Xi and Yao said happily, "Can you?" "All right, I forgot that brother is a seal grandmaster. With Xiaoling here, it won't be a problem to maintain the vitality of these 2 trees." Lei Xingfeng said, "Okay, you transplant it. Then we'll go back to the mirror world and I'll restore the seal." In fact, Lei Xingfeng knew very well that he didn't need to restore the entire seal. He just needed to copy the parts that affected the tree's growth. This was an extremely simple mission. It wasn't just to increase Lei Xi and Yao's collection. He was very tempted by the idea of brewing wine. Although he hadn't tried it yet, he trusted Lei Xi and Yao's words. After a while, Lei Xingfeng returned after transplanting the 2 trees into the mirror world. Looking at the 2 pits on the ground, Xi and Feng couldn't help but smile. He didn't expect that there would be what attributed treasures. Actually, he knew that these 2 trees, if they had lived for a long time, they would have become spiritual items. No wonder Lin Ling was so excited. Walking out of the blank spot, Xi and Feng walked out of the restriction and continued forward. Then, Lei Xingfeng saw a seal, a transfer seal. After thinking about it, Lei Xingfeng immediately understood that this was a one-way path. As long as he stood here, he would be transferred out. As for where he would be transferred to, Lei Xingfeng couldn't tell. Lei Xingfeng was still a sliver curious. He stepped on the seal and didn't use space techniques. This meant that the seal node here could touch Lei Xingfeng. In an instant, the formation came to life, and the surrounding space warped. Everything before Zhang Xian's eyes blurred, and his surroundings changed. On a small hill, Lei Xingfeng was surprised to see 3 people standing outside the seal. The seal in front of them had been activated. This meant that someone was trying to break in. Lei Xingfeng walked up and suddenly realized that he knew these 3. They were the 3 people he saw at the border of Illusion Sky Realm. Ding Er, Baki, Dangu. Then, Lei Xingfeng's eyes flashed with silver light. In an instant, he saw the person inside the seal. Mahjong. Lei Xingfeng walked up. Ding Er stared at Lei Xingfeng. He suddenly laughed and said, Good. I didn't expect to see you again. Ha! He seemed very happy. Baki looked back and said, Hey, our luck is getting better and better. Dangu said, Who cares if his luck is good or not? We're short on manpower, so we've got a free laborer. Haha, I think it's not that our luck is too good, but that his luck is too bad. Ha! The 3 people laughed proudly and stared at Lei Xingfeng like wolves. Ding Er said, That's right, I remember now. He seems to be very familiar with seals. Lei Xingfeng didn't pay attention to the 3 people. Instead, he walked to the edge of the seal and said, Take 3 steps to the left, then take 1 step forward. Dangu said, Don't joke around. If you speak here, the seal can't hear you. Lei Xingfeng said indifferently, If others speak, they might not be able to hear it. But if I speak, The people inside will definitely be able to hear it. Then he said, Mahjong, I'm a phone. Listen to my orders. No matter what's in front of you, do as I say. 1 step forward, 7 steps to the left, 1 step back, 8 steps forward, hurry up. Ding Air and the others didn't stop him. It was as if they wanted to see Lei Xingfeng make a fool of himself. Therefore, the 3 of them stood there without moving. They all laughed and watched the show. They didn't believe that Lei Xingfeng's words could reach the seal that had already been activated. Lei Xingfeng suddenly said, Good. Stand still, don't move. Dangu laughed and said, I'll move, I'll move. As he said this, he kept twisting. The 2 people beside him laughed. Then they heard Lei Xingfeng say, Good. Take a big step forward and slide your feet close to the ground. Then they saw a huge foot appear close to the ground. Then, with a loud roar, Ma Zhang's real body rushed out. Ding Air and the other 2 were stunned, but very quickly, the 3 of them were overjoyed. Xian Feng's understanding of restrictions was simply godly, too frightening. In the fantasy sky realm, if a practitioner's strength was strong, then they would at most have the ability to protect themselves, but if one's restriction ability was strong, then it meant that they had the ability to obtain large amounts of materials and treasures. The 3 of them quickly released their real bodies and surrounded Lei Xingfeng and Ma Zhang. Lei Xingfeng said indifferently, What do you want? Dinger grinned and said, Let's cooperate. I need to cooperate with you. Lei Xingfeng looked up at his huge real body and said with a smile, Not interested. Ding Air sneered and said, Not interested? Haha, I don't care if you're interested or not. As long as the 3 of us are interested, it's fine. Lei Xingfeng also laughed and said, So you're going to force me? Ding Air said, Of course. Ma Zhang didn't say a word. He was also forced by the 3 of them to cooperate. If there was a seal, he would be the one to break it. Once he found something good, he would have to share it with his collaborators. Moreover, he would only be left with some leftovers. He had long been angry in his heart, but his strength was inferior, so he couldn't flare up. Lei Xingfeng said, Of course my ass. Who do you think you are? Why should I cooperate with trash like you? Even if the 3 of you are trash together, you are still trash. Of course. I think you must die. Cursing loudly, Dingu, and Pokies were all stunned. They couldn't understand why Xian Feng dared to curse. It was obvious that he was alone. Could it be that he wanted to fight against the 3 of them? Was there something wrong with his head? Unable to think of an answer to this question, they all looked at Xian Feng blankly, completely dumbfounded. Lei Xingfeng wasn't stupid. As he cursed, he released Lei Yin, and then his true body appeared. Only the true body could deal with the true body, especially when it reached a certain level. In an instant, Lei Xingfeng's true body surpassed the 3 of them. The huge true body brought with it a huge deterrent force. The 3 of them went from stunned to shocked. Ma Zhang suddenly realized that Lei Xingfeng was completely different. He was like a different person compared to the Lei Xingfeng he saw before. This aura directly crushed the 3 of them. The 3 of them were dumbfounded. How could he be so strong? How is this possible? However, the 3 of them couldn't put down their faces just like that. Therefore, Ding Air said unyieldingly, You want to fight the 3 of us alone? These words already revealed a trace of cowardice. If they were really confident, they wouldn't talk nonsense. They would fight first. Ma Zhang gathered his courage and said, Me too. As he said that, he stood beside Lei Xingfeng. The conflict immediately became clear. At this point, both sides couldn't back down. Ding Air and the other 2 couldn't back down. They had already talked big. Now they couldn't back down. Xian Feng wasn't afraid of battle. After a few battles, his confidence had reached its peak. Not to mention 3 people. Even if there were 3 more, he wouldn't be afraid. He spoke, You came here for wealth, but you had to provoke me. Then you're not here for wealth, you're here for death. Ding Air, Pokies, and Dangu shouted at the same time, Fight. They were really unconvinced. 1 against 3? This was a battle between high-level cultivators. Chapter 836. Dinger, Bokis, and Dangu attacked at the same time. Ma Zhang shouted, Be careful. He knew that he couldn't contend with the three of them, so he took a step back instead. Lei Xingfeng was already aware of his own strength, so he didn't move. He just took the attacks head-on. 3 loud bangs were heard as 3 huge fists landed on Lei Xingfeng's body. His true body didn't even sway. It was like a steel mountain that the 3 couldn't shake. It was like an ordinary person hitting a steel wall with all his strength. The result would be broken bones and torn muscles. The 3 of them felt the same. Their true body didn't feel any pain, but if their true body was damaged, it would affect their seals. Once their seals were damaged, the cultivator would feel heartache. This kind of pain was thousands of times more intense than physical pain. It was heart-wrenching. The 3 of them were in heart-wrenching pain right now. The result was that their seals were damaged by the 3 of them. This kind of difference was like heaven and earth. If Lei Xingfeng wanted to kill the 3 of them, he only needed 3 attacks to destroy their true bodies. Even if they didn't die, there was almost no hope of survival in this place filled with restrictions. Unless they repaired their seals before the next danger came. This wasn't an easy task. The 3 of them continuously retreated. They were really frightened. They just took a punch head-on and were completely fine. However, the one who hit them had a problem. The 3 of them suddenly understood that the difference between them and Lei Xingfeng wasn't something that could be offset by the 3 of them working together. Bullying the weak and fearing the strong was the instinct of many people. It was the same for cultivators. When they discovered that their opponents were stronger than them, the 3 of them immediately had fewer options. Continuing to fight was courting death. Running away? How could they run? This place was filled with restrictions. What could they run to? Ma Zhang's mouth was wide open. He was also frightened. What kind of strength was this? Ding, and the others looked at each other. What could they do? Continue to fight? Lei Xingfeng took a step forward, scaring the 3 of them into taking 3 steps back. Lei Xingfeng said, "My request isn't high. Give me a punch each, and I'll let it go." Ding and the other 2 shook their heads like rattledrums. Ding said, "Let's talk. Let's talk." Ma Zhang said angrily, "Why didn't you say anything just now? You guys are too much." Lei Xingfeng raised 3 thick fingers and said, 3 punches, 1 punch per person. I won't hit too many. I'll return the punch to whoever hit me just now. The 3 of them did not dare to imagine who would be able to withstand Lei Xingfeng's punch. Not to mention taking a punch, the feeling of their own attack was quite overwhelming. It almost caused their real bodies to collapse. If Lei Xingfeng took the initiative, even if they managed to survive, they would probably be half dead. The 3 of them wanted to escape, but how could they? Unless someone made a sacrifice to stop Lei Xingfeng, they might not be able to stop him. Ding said, "We admit defeat." Lei Xingfeng said, "You can admit defeat, but you have to take 3 of my punches." Ma Zhang shouted, Yes, take 3 punches." The 3 of them were extremely regretful. Why did they provoke Lei Xingfeng for no reason? Provoking such a super expert, wasn't this the same as courting death? But Pokey said, "We admit defeat. We accept the punishment." When she said this, the 3 of them immediately understood. Lei Xingfeng might not have wanted to punch them. His goal was to extort them. Sure enough, Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "Accept the punishment? Let me think about it. 3 punches is to vent my anger. Hee. If you accept the punishment, name your price. What will you give me in exchange for not hitting you?" The 3 of them were about to vomit blood. They had to pay something, and Lei Xingfeng would only not hit them if he approved. This was too sullen. But compared to taking a punch, they would rather accept the punishment. Extortion was definitely better than fighting and killing. In fact, Lei Xingfeng didn't have any intention of killing them. Human experts weren't easy to cultivate, and they were relatively few in number. If he could preserve them, he would do his best to preserve them. Most importantly, the 3 of them didn't intend to kill him from the start. They just wanted to find someone to explore the restrictions. This made it difficult for Lei Xingfeng to kill them. Of course, if the 3 of them had wanted to kill Lei Xingfeng from the start, then the nature of the situation would be different. Lei Xingfeng's revenge would be even greater. Lei Xingfeng said, "If there are thunder attribute materials that satisfy me, I can choose not to punch you." Ma Zhang laughed. This feeling was very good. He was forced to go into the restrictions. Every time he found something good, they would take the majority, and he would take the ones that they didn't want. Now, Lei Xingfeng could be considered to have avenged him. All sorts of things were taken out for Lei Xingfeng to see. Lei Xingfeng kept saying, leave this too. I don't want the rest. If it's not enough, take out more for me to choose. Luckily, Lei Xingfeng only wanted thunder attribute materials. So the three of them took out all the thunder attribute materials they had collected and planned to trade. There were also some other things. All the materials that they didn't need were taken out for Lei Xingfeng to choose from. Ma Zhang's eyes were about to turn red. There were many materials that he needed. These 3 punches weren't cheap. The 3 of them had the same thought. If he didn't punch them, they would have to take out something to exchange. No matter how they thought about it, they felt sullen. Finally, Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, all right, it seems like you are all poor people. You don't have anything good. I'll take these. The things that were originally laid out for him to choose from. Lei Xingfeng actually kept them all in his hidden Luan space. The 3 of them stared dumbfoundedly. Ding Er said, you Lei Xingfeng said, oh, you still have other things that you didn't take out? Ding Er was so scared that he said, it's all here. He really wanted to say, leave some for me, don't take all of it. Lei Xingfeng said, all right, you guys barely pass. I won't punch you. The 3 of them wanted to cry, but had no tears. They couldn't even argue. How could they punch Lei Xingfeng? If they angered him again, they didn't have enough materials to calm him down. Ma Zhang also wanted to extort him, but unfortunately, he didn't have the strength. Seeing Lei Xingfeng get so many materials without any effort, he was also very emotional. Indeed, a cultivator's strength was paramount. With strength, everything was possible. Lei Xingfeng said, all right, why are you still holding on to your real body? Do you want to punch me 3 more times? The 3 of them hurriedly withdrew their real bodies. This time, although the 3 of them were heartbroken by Lei Xingfeng's extortion, they could still endure it. This was because Lei Xingfeng didn't want their own cultivation materials, but thunder or other types of materials. This wouldn't affect their cultivation. In addition, Lei Xingfeng's strength was really too strong, so they couldn't think of revenge. Lei Xingfeng and Ma Zhang also withdrew their real bodies. Lei Xingfeng said, I don't know how you guys reunited, but in the fantasy sky realm, you guys better restrain yourselves. There are experts here. There are really a lot of experts. I'm still easy to talk to. If you meet someone who isn't, you won't be able to take advantage of me. Ding, and the other 2 were tormented by Lei Xingfeng to the point that they didn't have a temper. The 3 of them were still worried that Lei Xingfeng would force them to explore the restrictions. If that happened, they would be miserable. However, Lei Xingfeng was proficient in restrictions, so he didn't need them to search for any restrictions. When he entered the restrictions, he wouldn't trigger any restrictions at all. As long as Lei Xingfeng discovered the treasures and materials in the restrictions in the fantasy sky realm, he could take them. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng didn't need anyone to follow him or help him. Even if he wanted someone to help him, he would only look for his own people. If it wasn't for his own people, he wouldn't be interested in greeting them. Lei Xingfeng said, you guys can leave. What are you still standing there for? He directly drove them away. He was very satisfied with the huge harvest and didn't want to continue tormenting the 3 of them. Ding Er said in surprise, you're letting us go? Lei Xingfeng said, nonsense, why would I let you stay? Is it fun? Go. Ding Er felt a trace of gratitude in his heart. He said, if that's the case, we'll take our leave. He gave a look to the others, and the 2 immediately turned and followed. The 3 of them quickly left. They were secretly glad that they could escape successfully after losing some treasures and materials. Ma Zhang said, you're letting them go just like that? Lei Xingfeng said, what else do you want? I don't plan to kill anyone. If I don't kill them, what can I do by staying here? Ma Zhang said, they can also explore the formations. Lei Xingfeng said, not interested. What kind of formations can the 3 of them explore? They're all simple ones. They don't dare to explore complex ones. He directly despised the 3 of them. Ma Zhang's face turned red. He was the same. He only dared to explore simple restrictions. Once he discovered a complex formation, he would immediately escape. Therefore, even if he gained something, it was quite limited. Mahjong said, all right, let's forget about it. Seeing the three of them disappear into the distance, he could only stop talking. Lei Xingfeng said, you can go by yourself. Mahjong said anxiously, can I go with you? Such a super expert, if he didn't follow him, it would be too courteous. Even if he picked up the leftovers, it would be better than looking for him himself. Furthermore, Xian Feng's strength was enough to protect him. Lei Xingfeng was not interested in bringing a burden. This time, he entered the fantasy sky realm to sweep. It would be very troublesome to bring one person, so he simply refused. No, I have something to do. I can't go with you. Mahjong was very disappointed. After a while, he could only agree. No matter what, he was still an expert. He could not shamelessly follow Lei Xingfeng. He said, all right, can you give me a suggestion? Which direction is better? Lei Xingfeng said, yes, go forward from here. There should be some simple restrictions. This was also his speculation. Although his speculation was not 100% accurate, it was between 50% and 50% accurate. In other words, there was a 50% chance of it being correct. Mahjong said, no matter what, you saved me. Thank you. Although he could not follow Lei Xingfeng, he was still grateful. Otherwise, he would have been controlled by Ding, and the other two. This trip to the fantasy sky realm would have been in vain. Chapter 837. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, you're welcome. No matter what, we're acquaintances. How can I ignore you when I see you? Mahjong then reluctantly bid farewell. He really didn't want to leave, but he didn't have a way to pester him. He wasn't a shameless person. Lei Xingfeng turned around and left. This was just a small interlude on his journey. Lei Xingfeng walked in another direction. This path was relatively remote. He observed as he walked. His speed wasn't very fast. There were many restrictions around him, big and small. If he walked in the past, he would have to go through a lot of trouble. Now, there was no problem at all. He walked directly and searched to see if there was anything useful. Lei Xingfeng leisurely searched. He felt very relaxed. Compared to the past, it was much more relaxed. After walking through more than 10 restrictions, he also collected some materials. However, the quality and quantity were relatively low. Lei Xingfeng wasn't very satisfied. This path was soon blocked by a restriction. Lei Xingfeng stopped and observed for a while. He found that there were quite a lot of restriction nodes in this restriction. It was also quite complicated. This meant that this was a large-scale restriction. He wanted to find a large-scale restriction now. Only this kind of restriction would have the chance to find something truly good. After a moment, Lei Xingfeng sighed in disappointment. This was a restriction that had been touched recently. However, Lei Xingfeng didn't look back. He walked directly into the restriction. Anyway, his current methods were very good. He wasn't afraid of this kind of complex restriction. He walked and searched in the restriction. Sure enough, there was nothing inside. Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but curse. He found that the materials and treasures that were originally produced here had been completely turned to dust because of the activation of the restriction. Perhaps these treasures and materials would only be reproduced after 10 or 20 years. Sighing, Lei Xingfeng couldn't do anything about it. Although there weren't many people here, there were traces of people passing by everywhere. Some people were obviously not strong enough, but they would still run around randomly. If they could find something, they would be lucky. If they couldn't find it, or if it was destroyed by the restrictions, they wouldn't care. In any case, I saw it first, so I'll go first. After passing through this large restriction, Lei Xingfeng arrived outside. Immediately after, there was another restriction. Lei Xingfeng didn't even look carefully as he directly entered. Then, he saw a corpse that had been mostly shattered by the restriction. It was an outsider. Most of its huge body had been shattered, leaving only a long tail and a huge leg. The rest of its body was charred black and shattered into pieces the size of a wash basin. A stench assailed his nostrils. Lei Xingfeng hurriedly walked past the corpses and quickly walked over. He realized that this restriction had not been in operation for more than 10 days. Lei Xingfeng would not search for this kind of activated restriction array. His past experience had shown that there would not be anything left in this kind of restriction array. Therefore, directly passing through this restriction array was the only choice. Because of his spatial skill, Lei Xingfeng formed a small displacement space around his body. All the restriction nodes would be replaced as soon as they were touched. The entire restriction array was completely unable to react to Lei Xingfeng. This restriction array was quite large. Lei Xingfeng walked for a full 3 hours. This was still walking in a straight line, but his speed wasn't slow. If it was in the past, Lei Xingfeng estimated that it would take at least 1 or 2 days. During this time, he would have to find an empty spot to rest before he could successfully pass through this restriction array. After spending 3 hours, Lei Xingfeng walked out of the restriction array and let out a long breath. Lei Xingfeng was very satisfied with the performance of his spatial skill. With this skill, no restriction array could stop him, unless it was also a spatial restriction array. In that case, there might be some problems with this skill. Before he tried it, he didn't have much confidence in spatial restrictions. Then, Lei Xingfeng saw a dense array of restrictions. They were arranged like fish scales. Circles of restrictions extended outwards. Each restriction wasn't big, only a few hundred square meters. However, when countless similar restrictions were arranged into an array, this restriction array wasn't weak at all. Lei Xingfeng named this restriction array the fish scale restriction array. Lane also had it. Although it wasn't a large compound restriction array, it belonged to the category of superimposed restrictions. Each small restriction array could provide a certain amount of power. When all the restrictions combined, the attack power was quite strong. No matter how strong it was useless against Lei Xingfeng. He simply wouldn't trigger this restriction array. For this kind of restriction array, as long as one was triggered, it would cause a chain reaction. Therefore, as long as it wasn't triggered, this restriction array wouldn't be a threat. Lei Xingfeng walked into the restriction array. The result was as he expected. There were some materials and rare treasures inside, but the quantity wasn't large. However, after being disappointed several times, Lei Xingfeng was more satisfied with the harvest. When he was tired of plundering, Lei Xingfeng returned to the mirror realm to rest. Sometimes he would go to the big crack to cultivate for a period of time to verify his ideas. Some succeeded and some failed. However, he was in a good mood and didn't care too much. As time passed, the number of materials and treasures he plundered was quite large. During this period, he also stabilized 2 Lei Yin, and the restrictions between them gradually converged. Lei Xingfeng's own Lei Yin had a large increase in the number of restrictions. Currently, there were more than 40,000 restrictions. Although there was a big gap between the number of restrictions and 100,000 restrictions, the speed of progress was already very frightening. The main reason was that he gradually collected more materials. Whether it was the quality or quantity, the stock had greatly increased. Coupled with the sufficient energy crystals, he fully satisfied Lei Yin's needs. Gradually, Lei Xingfeng also had experience. He specifically looked for powerful restrictions in the fantasy sky realm, especially strong ones. He even hoped to find compound restrictions with space restrictions. However, he was unlucky and hadn't found a super large restriction array that really gave him a headache. In the fantasy sky realm, Lei Xingfeng was actually playing a treasure hunting game. Because he was proficient in restrictions, this game was not dangerous for him. Therefore, his ultimate goal was to find the most powerful restriction array. According to the rules that he found out, the more powerful the restriction array, the better the items it produced. This had been tested many times. Lei Xingfeng also deliberately went to the restriction array outside the maze. As a result, the restrictions that he didn't dare to enter before were now freely explored. However, he didn't find many good items. At most, he found various kinds of stalagmites. In the end, he found that the stalagmites that contained energy crystals were the greatest harvest. Although energy crystals were very important, Lei Xingfeng wanted special materials more now, especially thunder attribute special materials. These things were too rare. So far, he had only found one or two of them. This was after he ran through countless restrictions to discover and collect them. On this day, Lei Xingfeng came to a restriction array and collected a lot of stalagmites. After collecting them, Lei Xingfeng basically put them in the Mirror Realm's warehouse. Except for the best and the best, he didn't care about the rest. Of course, he wouldn't let go of any stalagmites that he saw. No matter how many stalagmites there were, they would be exhausted. When he came out of the restriction, he saw a huge upward slope. It was vast, and the entire ground was tilted up. Then he saw two huge true bodies. Due to the distance, the two true bodies were as big as a person. However, he knew that the true bodies were definitely not smaller than 100 meters. Then, from the rising smoke, Lei Xingfeng found a few more outsiders. They also had huge bodies. The two sides seemed to be fighting. If Lei Xingfeng had encountered such a situation before, he would have turned around and left immediately. It wasn't like he hadn't seen people die before. However, it was different now. First of all, his strength had reached an extremely high level. Second of all, in this place, except for a few internal conflicts, most of the humans were united against outsiders, especially outsiders and star beasts. Generally, as long as they saw them, they would go up and help. Rumbling sounds came from the distance. At the top of the slope, their battle had already caused smoke and dust to billow. There were also many restrictions on this slope, but they were twisted and not connected together. Suddenly, a true body grew, and according to Exine Feng's estimation, it grew from 100 meters to 160 to 70 meters, a large increase in height. Then, Exine Feng saw another outsider's body grow as well. Although it didn't reach that height, it still reached 130 meters, which was a peak existence among the outsider race. Lei Xingfeng began to run up the slope. He didn't care whether there were restrictions or not. He walked in a straight line. If he went around the restrictions, the path would be at least 10 times longer. Now, Lei Xingfeng didn't care about the restrictions at all. He directly rushed over. Even if he didn't have time to use his spatial skill and activate the restrictions, he would have already rushed over. The distance in a straight line was the shortest. Lei Xingfeng only spent 10 minutes to get close to the two sides of the battle. From here, he could see more clearly. Moreover, the outsiders and human cultivators could see Lei Xingfeng running over. A phone come quickly. Lei Xingfeng knew it was Xingfeng's voice. Looking at his true body, which was burning with flames, Lei Xingfeng understood that Xingfeng had advanced. It was just that his true body wasn't stable enough. As Xingfeng's true body wasn't stable, he didn't dare to use his true body at full strength, which limited his strength, to the point that his strength wasn't even as good as before, causing him to feel extremely sullen. When he saw Exine Feng, he was overjoyed, as his comrade wasn't even as good as him. Lei Xingfeng's eyes swept over. There were 3 outsiders. Moreover, one of them was struggling to rush out of the restriction. That outsider's strength wasn't bad. He didn't get lost in the restriction and accurately rushed to the edge of the restriction. Lei Xingfeng shouted, "Why are there so many outsiders?" Xingfeng said, "They're preventing us from entering this restriction array. There might be good things inside." This was the rhythm of a fight. However, Xingfeng didn't expect there to be so many outsiders. At the beginning of the battle, he was facing one outsider. He didn't expect that as soon as the battle started, 2 would come. Most importantly, there was another outsider in the restriction array. Chapter 838. 3 versus 2 would soon become 4 versus 2. Fortunately, Xingfeng also had an expert like Lei Xingfeng. Now it was 3 versus 3. The outsider in the restriction wouldn't be able to come out so easily. There was an expert on the other side who was having a good fight with Xingfeng. The other 2 outsiders weren't weak either. The human cultivator who was with Xingfeng was also a high-level monarch. However, when he was dealing with an outsider, the other outsider didn't make a move. He was just wandering around the 4 of them. It was obvious that he was planning to launch a sneak attack. When he saw Lei Xingfeng running over, the outsider who was planning to launch a sneak attack regretfully gave up. Then, He ran towards Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng instantly released his true body. He couldn't be careless at this time. Clearly, these outsiders weren't weak. They were all top-notch experts. They were probably the top existences among the outsiders. This wasn't strange. There were many ways to reach the fantasy sky realm. However, those who could enter and survive without high-level strength wouldn't be able to survive for long. If a Tao Lord Old Ancestor came here, even if it was a peak Tao Lord Old Ancestor, once they entered the restriction, they wouldn't be able to withstand the attack of the restriction unless someone helped them. Their chances of survival were very small. Therefore, one had to be at least a low-level monarch in this place. Otherwise, it would be difficult to move an inch. Even a low-level monarch would find it difficult to move. When Lei Xingfeng's true body came out, everyone except Xingfeng was frightened. Even the outsiders were no exception. The outsider who was running towards Lei Xingfeng was the first to show hesitation. Clearly, he slowed down. He probably didn't expect a super expert to come. Not to mention other things, just that terrifying true body was enough to make him somewhat timid. Xingfeng laughed and said, "Don't be polite. Kill him." Once Lei Xingfeng's true body moved, it wasn't clumsy at all. It was very agile as it charged forward. One must know that Lei Xingfeng's true body was more than 200 meters tall. It was much stronger than the foreign race's ability to expand their bodies. When it stepped on the ground, the earth began to tremble. The rumbling sound was simply shocking. Facing Lei Xingfeng, the outsider revealed a trace of fear. However, he understood that he absolutely could not retreat. If he did not retreat, he could still fight with Lei Xingfeng. If he retreated, he would have no chance at all. That would be courting death. Even if he died, he could not retreat. In other words, there was still a chance of survival if they fought, but death was certain if they retreated. The outsider let out a heart-wrenching roar, and his body expanded like a balloon. His body, which was originally over 80 meters tall, suddenly expanded to over 120 meters tall. All of the veins on his body bulged out, and there were even traces of blood seeping out of them. Then, a purplish-black color emerged from his body and enveloped his entire body. Xingfeng said, "Feng, be careful. He has activated his entire body's potential." Lei Xingfeng knew this. Once he activated his entire body's potential, even if there was no battle, it would be good if he could survive. If there was a battle, it was certain that this person would not be able to survive. This was going all out. The so-called going all out meant that he was really going all out with his life. Even if Lei Xingfeng retreated, he would still have to bear the consequences. Lei Xingfeng naturally wouldn't retreat. He rushed forward a few steps and was already able to face the outsider. With a loud roar, Lei Xingfeng threw out a punch. His body was over 200 meters tall. This punch actually produced a sharp sound as it pierced through the air. Lei Xingfeng's voice exploded, "Fight!" Boom! A mushroom cloud rose. Lei Xingfeng used his full strength in this punch. Because he had never used his full strength before, he also wanted to see what level his strength had reached during this period of cultivation. Therefore, he didn't hold back at all. The two Lei Yin emitted a dazzling light. That was the display of his full strength. This punch contained the energy within Lei Yin. It was an attack without any attribute, a pure attack, a pure punch. There was no lightning attribute, no spatial attribute. It was just a punch that met force with force. However, this punch shocked everyone. Even Lei Xingfeng was stunned. He maintained his punching posture, and his figure flickered in and out of the mushroom cloud. He was like a god, majestic and awe-inspiring. The outsider in front of Lei Xingfeng couldn't take this punch at all. What a joke. Lei Xingfeng's full strength attack was the full strength attack of a second true ring body. This level of attack could be said to be unstoppable among the experts in the fantasy sky realm. The punch shattered his entire body. The outsider didn't even make a sound. He heard crackling sounds coming from his body. Then, like a pile of mud, he softened. In an instant, large amounts of blood splattered on the ground. Xingfeng and his companions were stunned. Xingfeng knew that Lei Xingfeng was strong, but to be this strong was indeed unexpected. He was too strong. Killed in one blow. The The outsider didn't have any regrets. If Lei Xingfeng's full strength attack could be blocked, then Lei Xingfeng's second true ring body would be worthless. Lei Xingfeng let out a long breath and ran towards Xingfeng. His huge body emerged from the dust cloud. Even Xingfeng was a little afraid of that aura. He knew that Lei Xingfeng was here to help him, but seeing Lei Xingfeng's aura, he really had the urge to retreat. The outsider fighting Xingfeng was facing the same problem. He couldn't run. Seeing Lei Xingfeng's speed, he knew that he couldn't run. If he couldn't run, then he had to fight. However, seeing his companion's miserable state, he really panicked. Unable to advance or retreat, without waiting for Xingfeng to reach him, Xingfeng had already made his move. With a punch, his large fist ignited with raging flames, causing that outsider to pay the price for his indecisiveness. A punch landed on the outsider's chest, and with a boom, that outsider staggered. Just as he was about to lose his footing, Xingfeng arrived. He swept his leg. This time, Xingfeng still used his full strength. That was not all. This time, there was a large amount of lightning on his feet. It was like a thick lightning whip lashing out horizontally. The outsider could not dodge or dodge. He could not even turn his body because he had just taken a punch from Xingfeng, which made him stiff. The only thing he could move was his mouth. The outsider looked at the leg sweeping towards him and let out an earth-shattering scream. One had to know that Lei Xingfeng's leg hadn't even hit him yet, but he was already in despair. Crack! Boom! When Lei Xingfeng's leg landed on the outsider's body, the crisp sound was simply terrifying. Then, with a loud bang, the outsider was sent flying. His huge body flew into the air. Lei Xingfeng's huge body suddenly turned and kicked up with his other leg. Crack! Boom! The few of them could clearly see that the flying body of the outsider suddenly bent, although it didn't break, but the angle of it was impossible for an outsider's body to appear. In other words, Xingfeng's kick had broken his body. After killing 2 people in a row, the outsider finally rushed out of the restriction. When he saw the scene in front of him, he was frightened. It wasn't the first time he had fought with cultivators, but he had lost 2 experts on his side. This was something he had never seen before. The blow in an instant made his eyes turn red. The outsider wasn't angry. Instead, his eyes turned red from fear. With red eyes, the outsider screamed and rushed back into the restriction. He rushed to the other side of the restriction. The other outsider who was fighting against Xingfeng's companion also rushed towards the restriction. He would rather risk his life in the restriction than face Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng didn't give chase because he knew it was too late. Xingfeng and his companion didn't give chase either. The 2 of them stood still and watched as the 2 outsiders rushed into the restriction. Xingfeng said, "All right, they would rather rush into the restriction than fight. These 2 guys have lost their courage." Lei Xingfeng looked at the corpse on the ground and said, "They are really weak." Xingfeng laughed bitterly. He knew the strength of these 2 guys very well, especially the guy he was fighting against, who wasn't inferior to a peak stage sovereign king. Even he found it difficult to fight against him. Of course, if he could completely stabilize the fire seal, killing his opponent wouldn't be a difficult task. Lei Xingfeng withdrew his real body. Xingfeng and his companion also did the same. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "I haven't congratulated you on your successful advancement." Xingfeng smiled and said, "I was lucky to succeed. There were many regrettable aspects. It was quite difficult to advance." Lei Xingfeng said, "As long as you succeed, you can continue to adjust. You have the time." Once he advanced, his lifespan would be extended. That was why he said that. Xingfeng said, "Come, this is a friend of mine, Du Deco. Deco, this is also my friend, Lei Xingfeng. Just call him a phone." Du Deco said, "A phone, nice to meet you. Just call me Deco." This was a burly man with a full beard. He looked very forthright. He said, "A phone, you have 2 true ring bodies like Brother Xing?" Seeing Lei Xingfeng's strength, he couldn't help but ask. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Yes, indeed. I have 2 true ring bodies." Xingfeng said, "Deco, believe me, this is the path of cultivation. Here, the monarch stage is the limit. In the outside world, this is the beginning of the higher stages. Du Decaux nodded and said, after seeing a Feng's attack power, I believe you. It's unbelievable that there is such a miraculous cultivation method in the outside world. Xing Feng said, it's not miraculous. They just found a path of cultivation that we don't know about. Once we know about it, we can also pursue it. Du Decaux said, I don't have that many materials and energy. It's too difficult. I've spent most of my life cultivating my own seal. I've spent a lot of time and energy, but now I have to cultivate another seal. It's really difficult. Xian Feng spoke. Indeed, it's very hard. It's like cultivating the seal again and starting over again. Although it's much easier than the first time, but thinking about it carefully, how much resources would it take? He used a ready-made Leyin, but it still took a lot of energy and materials. If he had to cultivate another Leyin, he would have a headache just thinking about it. Chapter 839. Xing Feng said, You're not going to cultivate it? Du Decaux said, Are you kidding? Of course I'm going to cultivate it. No matter how hard or unwilling it is, I'm going to do it again. No matter what, I'm going to cultivate it again. Lei Xingfeng said, How can one time be enough? Du Decaux said, What do you mean? How can one time be enough? Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, When two seals are stacked together, you'll have two true ring bodies. Hee, when three seals are stacked together, you'll have three true ring bodies. How many seals do you think you can cultivate? Du Decaux's jaw dropped. After a while, he said, Yeah, how many seals do I have to cultivate before I'm done? Xing Feng laughed. There's no end to it. Haha, why are you worrying about this? Your task now is to cultivate one more seal. Even if it's hard, I'm sure you can do it, right? Du Decaux couldn't help but laugh. He had been thinking too much. He didn't even have one extra seal. Why would he worry about a few seals? Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but laugh. He had two Leyin now, and it was enough to make him worry. Not to mention the adjustments, the constant replenishment of materials and energy, the coordination of the seals inside. And sometimes, he even had to rely on his understanding of seals to remove some useless seals. All of these things took up a lot of his time and energy. There were also countless materials and energy crystals. And this was just one more Leyin. If he had another Leyin, he would have to worry even more. Fortunately, Lei Xingfeng had a ready-made Leyin. At least he didn't have to refine a Leyin himself. He just had to find a way to connect with the Leyin. Of course, connecting with the Leyin wasn't as simple as refining a new Leyin. There were many tedious things to do, and many materials and energy crystals had to be consumed. Even so, if Lei Xingfeng had a choice, he would still choose to work with Leyin instead of creating a new Leyin. This was because he might not be able to gather all the basic materials needed for a new Leyin. Adding on the fact that Lei Xingfeng was proficient in restrictions and had the Thunder Soul item and Shao Kong, it was actually easier to modify Leyin. Xing Feng said, Feng, how are your preparations? After I consolidate the fire seal, I will leave this place. Du Decaux clearly didn't understand Xing Feng's plan. He said, Leave this place? Where are we going? Xing Feng said, Let's go to the outside world. This place is no longer suitable for us. We have to find a new world to develop in. Du Decaux suddenly became excited and said, Take me with you. Xing Feng immediately rejected. Impossible, you are not strong enough. At the very least, you need to have two true ring bodies, Dao Saint level. Otherwise, we'll die on the way. Du Decaux was stunned. He said, You need such a high cultivation? I am a high-level monarch king. Even I can't do it. Xing Feng said, When I was a peak-stage monarch king, I didn't even dare to go. High-stage monarch king, forget it. If you really want to go, you have to be prepared to die on the way. Du Decaux wanted to develop and didn't want to die on the way. He hesitated and said, All right, when I reach the Dao Saint level, I will go too. However, you have to give me the map. Xing Feng nodded and said, That's fine. However, to reach the Dao Saint level, Kiki, it will be difficult. Although Du Decaux was unhappy with Xing Feng's attitude, he knew that she wasn't spouting nonsense. He laughed bitterly and said, Don't look down on me like that. Xing Feng patted him on the shoulder and said, "If you were proficient in restrictions, perhaps I would not say this. But your knowledge of restrictions is worse than mine. And go and learn some restrictions first. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to reach the Tao Saint level." Dudeku nodded and said, "All right, I was thinking too much. We can talk about this in the future." Xing Feng said, "Let's go. Let's enter this restriction. I wonder if there is anything left behind." Lei Xingfeng looked back and said, "Don't go. There can't be anything left behind." Those two outsiders collided with each other. No matter what it is, it will be destroyed. Xing Feng slapped her thigh and said, "Damn it, these bastards." Lei Xingfeng said, "What is in this restriction?" Dudeku said, "There are stalagmite crystals. I'm still lacking some of these crystals. Most of the restrictions here are growing these things. If we are lucky, we will be able to find a few." Lei Xingfeng was stunned and said, "A few?" Dudeku said, "Yes, if we can find a few, it is already very good." Suddenly, Exine Feng reacted. It wasn't just a few stalagmites. If he tried to force his way in, the restrictions would activate, and the stalagmites that were originally growing would all be destroyed by the restrictions. How many would be able to survive? He would be considered lucky if he managed to get a few. Lei Xingfeng said, "Don't look, there is definitely none. How many stalagmites do you need? What is their quality?" Dudeku said, "Normal quality is good. Don't even think about top quality or top quality. Those things will be destroyed the moment the restriction activates." Lei Xingfeng really didn't have any normal stalagmites. They were all stored in the Mirror World's warehouse. He found a lot of stalagmites. Because he could enter without activating the restrictions, he could get a lot of stalagmite crystals. Lei Xingfeng said, "Fine, I will give you 3 stalagmites." Saying so, he took out 3 thick stalagmites. They were all top-quality stalagmites. Dudeku was stunned and said, "For me? You mean you are giving them to me?" Lei Xingfeng said, "What? You don't want them?" Dudeku reached out, and the 3 stalagmites fell into his hidden lunar space. He said, "You must be joking. How can I not want a top-quality stalagmite?" "This is for you." He didn't want to take advantage of others, so he took out the thunder element materials he collected. There weren't many, but they were all top-quality materials. Lei Xingfeng didn't want to trade, but he didn't care about quality and value. It was an interaction between friends. Xing Feng said, "I knew you had good stuff. You can even find these stalagmites. All right, trade some for me too?" Lei Xingfeng laughed. "No need, I will give you some. How many do you need?" Xing Feng laughed. "Of course, the more the better." "Haha, just kidding. Give me a few." Exine Feng gave a few high-quality stalagmites. As for high-quality stalagmites, he couldn't even bear to use them himself. It was impossible for him to give them away. Unless he saw something he was interested in, he would only consider exchanging them. Dudeku smiled and said, "I've been searching for a long time. Every time I charge into the formation, all I see are broken pieces of stalagmites. I am so annoyed." Lei Xingfeng said, "This is how the formation protects the stalagmites. After these stalagmites are broken, they don't disappear. As time passes, they will slowly grow back, and their quality will be better." Dudeku was surprised. "Ah, you can do that?" Lei Xingfeng said, "This is because of the formation. If it didn't do that, the formation would have been destroyed long ago. Every time is cleaned out, the formation will become a tree without roots or water without a source." In fact, he could clean it out, but he didn't say it. Dudeku said, "Okay, I don't know anything about formations anyway." Xing Feng laughed. "If you can clean it out, who cares if the formation can last?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Many of the formations here have been destroyed. As time passes and more people come, this place will become more and more barren. When the formation disappears, this place will be useless." Xing Feng said, "At that time, we will probably all be dead." Dudeku laughed. "Yes, we will probably all be dead. Who cares about what will happen to this place?" Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but laugh. This was probably what they meant by, "after I die. I don't care about the flood that will come after me." Perhaps all cultivators were like this. There was no concept of sustainable development in this world. The biggest destroyers of this world were the cultivators. The amount of resources they consumed was terrifying. Once they ran out of resources, they would immediately migrate and look for a suitable place to develop. Xingfeng and Lei Xingfeng were like this. When they reached a limit, they would look for a suitable place to cultivate. No matter how dangerous it was, they would go there. This was Lei Xingfeng's second time migrating. The last time it migrated here, the entire hidden sect developed greatly. They were much stronger than when they were in their hometown. No wonder it was difficult for cultivators to stay in one place for a long time. Just the problem of resources and energy made it difficult for them to stay for a long time, not to mention the problem of cultivation. The outer realm was actually very big, but there weren't many places suitable for cultivation. There weren't enough resources either. The main reason was that the resources were scattered across the various continents. Unless there was someone like Lei Xingfeng who had the Mirror Realm, it would be difficult for them to develop. Forces like the Ming-Zhe alliance mostly occupied many continents. They relied on various small and medium-sized sects to occupy the continent's resource points and distribute them uniformly. Only then could they gradually grow and develop. However, Lei Xingfeng's hidden sect was completely different. First, there weren't enough people. Second, the Mirror Realm could be used as a transportation hub. As long as they found a resource, they could rely on the Mirror Realm and send people to mine it. Therefore, the Mirror Realm's development would be faster. Xingfeng said, "Do you want to come with us?" Lei Xingfeng said, "No, let's set a time. We'll meet at the trading point." Xingfeng thought for a while and said, "I need about 10 more days to stabilize. This time, I also want to get some stalagmite crystals." Haha, I didn't expect to meet outsiders. All right, we'll go to the trading point in 100 days. If we don't see them, then we'll just wait. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Then it's settled." Xingfeng and Du Deku then turned and left. Xi and Feng observed his surroundings and noticed that there was still a restricted area that no one had touched yet. He knew that if it wasn't for Xingfeng and the outsiders fighting, the restrictions of this area would have been activated. There was no hope that they would be able to avoid this restriction. Stepping into the restriction, Lei Xingfeng walked to the center of the restriction. After a while, Lei Xingfeng arrived at the area with restrictions. This area was quite big, about a few hundred square meters. The ground was covered with stalagmites. Chapter 840. Once the restriction was triggered, the surrounding stalagmites would shatter into pieces. Only the ones in the middle would remain. Even if some of the stalagmites were left behind, if the challengers were able to reach this place, they would be able to reap some rewards. However, people like Lei Xingfeng, who didn't trigger the restriction and went directly to the empty spot, would reap even more rewards. All the stalagmites that grew in the empty spot would be dug up by him. In a short moment, the ground was filled with holes. The stalagmites that were produced were all dug up by Lei Xingfeng. Among them, there were at least 10 top-grade stalagmites. There were also quite a few high-quality ones. The rest were just normal stalagmites. Lei Xingfeng found it funny. He had just given away some stalagmites, but the rewards were even greater. Just this time alone, he had gotten close to 1,000 stalagmites. The rewards here were much better than wandering around the continent. It was no wonder that so many experts came here to search. Even if it was just attacking the formation, the things that these high-level cultivators obtained far exceeded what they could get on the continent. This was because the things here were most suitable for cultivators. There were many treasures that cultivators didn't even need to deal with. They could be directly absorbed by the seal. The importance of seals was something that Lei Xingfeng understood more and more clearly as his cultivation grew. Once the seal had an embryonic form, it could grow. It grew as if it was alive. It had its own rules and also needed various materials and energy to nourish it. In the beginning, this kind of production wasn't very obvious. When one reached the monarch rank, it became very clear. At this time, changing the seal was a very difficult thing. It was like changing something that had already been set. It was very difficult. However, Lei Xingfeng was different. He was proficient in restrictions. In other words, he understood most of the restrictions within the seal. He could even influence the seal. At this time, the seal could grow according to his thoughts. This was very terrifying. One had to know that the growth of the seal itself would produce many useless restrictions. These restrictions took up resources and energy, but they couldn't be used. Lei Xingfeng's role was to remove these restrictions and preserve or even strengthen the restrictions that were useful. This made a seal very special. The strength of the seal led to the strength of Lei Xingfeng's true body. At this point, Lei Xingfeng realized that he was invincible. After a few battles, he understood that his modification of the seal had paid off extremely well. The importance of the seal was something that Lei Xingfeng attached great importance to. As long as he had time, he would refine his seal. As for the lightning attribute, he didn't care. Although the lightning attribute was powerful, compared to the strength of the seal, the lightning attribute wasn't much. One was an attribute, the other was an overall strength. Lightning still needed to be attached to the seal to exist. Which was more important, Lei Xingfeng was very clear in his heart. For his own Leiyin, Lei Xingfeng searched through all the restrictions in this area. As the restrictions couldn't stop Lei Xingfeng's actions, as long as the restrictions weren't touched or plundered, then Lei Xingfeng could harvest all the materials and treasures in the restrictions. After this round, Lei Xingfeng earned a lot. There were many materials and treasures. Some of them were directly absorbed by the seal, some were stored away, and the last were treasures and materials that he didn't need. They were all stored in the Mirror Realm's warehouse. More than 80 days passed quickly. Lei Xingfeng knew that it was about time. If he was still wandering around the fantasy sky realm, then he could still find some things. However, he knew that it was time to leave. At the very least, he had to go back and make arrangements to withdraw the people from the bases. After returning to the Mirror Realm, Lei Xingfeng immediately gathered his people and began to withdraw from the bases. He also went there personally. When Lei Xingfeng arrived at the base, he saw the vast expanse of farmland. Only then did he realize that this place had developed very well. It was a pity that he had to give up everything. Lei Xingfeng couldn't be satisfied with this world. Actually, for the secret sect, this place wasn't bad. However, Lei Xingfeng and the secret sect were already one. If he wanted to leave, then the secret sect couldn't stay because he was the owner of the Mirror Realm. The entire secret sect was tied to Lei Xingfeng. However, everyone was happy to do so. With Lei Xingfeng around, the secret sect's confidence was greatly boosted. Moreover, many of the secret sect's higher-ups were about to advance to the beginner monarch rank. During this period, Lei Xingfeng had to provide them with resources and energy. Once they advanced to the monarch rank, the level of consumption would increase exponentially. However, once they reached the monarch rank, they could go out and search for materials themselves. It was impossible to rely on Lei Xingfeng to provide them. The materials needed to reach the monarch rank could be said to be something that even a medium-sized sect couldn't afford. Basically, after reaching the monarch rank, all the materials had to be prepared by oneself unless someone was willing to provide them. For example, Lei Xingfeng often gave the wood-type materials he found to Lei Xingyao. This was because the two of them were siblings and had a very good relationship. Lei Xingfeng was willing to do so. Most of the things in the base had to be moved into the Mirror Realm. As for the houses, they didn't care about them and just left them where they were. Also, the restrictions that Lei Xingfeng set up in the past weren't taken back. Firstly, it had been too long. Secondly, it wasn't worth taking back. With Lei Xingfeng's current eyesight, the restrictions were crude and clumsy. It was almost useless. It was so crude that he was embarrassed to look at it. This was the process of learning and mastering. Looking back, it wasn't possible in the past. However, without the effort in the past, he wouldn't be able to reach such a high level now. Lei Xingfeng sighed. This place has also become a ruin. It's just that there's no value in excavating it. Wu Yang laughed. When we excavated ruins in the past, it was the same. Many of them were empty. The things we wanted still depended on luck. Gucci said, we still got a lot of good stuff. Some sects moved too quickly and left behind many things that we needed. They didn't have the Mirror Realm when they moved. Most of them carried things with them in their hidden Luin space. You have to know that the capacity of a hidden Luin space is limited. Everyone had their own things to carry. In the end, when they couldn't carry anymore, they threw away a lot of things. Wu Yang laughed. It's funny when you think about it. Back then, a group of perfected monarchs were running around in other people's ruins. They were often beaten up by the humanoid beasts that carried the items. When they saw the restrictions, they could only stare at them helplessly. Haha, that's really something. Lei Xingfeng said, yeah, I still keep a lot of humanoid beasts. They're useless for fighting, but they're still good for doing silly things. Gucci sighed. Maybe those sects moved because there were better places to develop. Lei Xingfeng said, that's not entirely the case. Maybe the local resources weren't enough, so they moved. I don't know where they've settled down now. Wu Yang said, if they're lucky, they'll find a place rich in resources to settle down. If they're unlucky, Gucci said, the sects have disappeared and the people have withered. Actually, the secret door that we came out of is just a natural chasm, and it's already scattered. There were carts, horse-drawn carriages, ox carts, and steel humanoid beasts produced by the Mirror Realm. All kinds of carts were filled with things. There were also many low-level disciples helping. Many of these low-level disciples had their own homes in the base and a lot of relatives and friends, so they all came to help. They also had hidden Luan spaces, so they could carry a lot of things. They were the main force in moving. In the huge drying field, a group of people gathered and then activated the Mirror Realm to send them away. After working for half a day, the originally bustling crowd and carts were mostly kept in the Mirror Realm. There were only a few scattered search team members left to do a final search of the base to prevent missing people and vehicles. Lei Xingfeng looked around. A large area of farmland had been harvested and cleaned up. Rows of ridges divided the farmland neatly. There were piles of straw beside the farmland. These were all abandoned. At a glance, there was no end to the farmland. What a pity! Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but sigh. Who knew how much manpower and resources would be used to harvest such a large area of farmland? Wu Yang understood the situation better than Lei Xingfeng. He said, yes, it's a pity. We've had a good harvest for a few years. The land is ripe, but it's all abandoned. The price is not small. Lei Xingfeng knew that the production base was a semi-military area. It was completely different from a normal village. Because it was attached to the secret door, the people who worked here were all taken care of by the secret door. Their food, clothing, housing, and transportation were all taken care of by the secret door. Wu Yang said, this is enough. Let's go to the next base. That's the livestock base. Lei Xingfeng agreed. A few of the higher-ups directly went through the Mirror Realm to the livestock base. Because of the vast area, there was a large amount of livestock. There were all kinds of cattle, sheep, deer, chickens, ducks, geese, and pigs. There were also herds of livestock. At a glance, the number of animals was astonishing. Wu Yang said, these can be moved to the Mirror Realm. Most of them have been slaughtered. Most of the meat has been cured and dried. Every family has a lot of meat. Those that can be moved to the Mirror Realm are livestock that are kept for breeding. Lei Xingfeng saw a herd of bulls. Their huge bodies were very eye-catching. He said, these bulls are also kept for breeding, right? A low-level cultivator beside him said, yes. After the bulls were tamed, they are not as violent as before. Lei Xingfeng nodded. He knew how violent the bulls were. In the past, in order to hunt the bulls, one had to be strong. Bulls were important meat cows. In the secret door, it was basically eaten by cultivators. Ordinary people could not eat this kind of meat. In the secret door, this was a privilege that belonged to cultivators. This was because bull meat had a good nourishing effect on the body. It was one of the few meat that was good for the body of a beginner cultivator. The large-scale breeding of bulls was only done after the establishment of the animal husbandry base. After many years of domestication, the number of bulls had increased and they began to breed them on a large scale. At the best time, they had domesticated several thousand bulls. For this migration, 80% of them were slaughtered and the rest were kept as breeding cattle. Chapter 841. There were a large number of low-level practitioners working in the farm, so some practitioners came to help. Lei Xingfeng didn't expect the hidden sect to have so many people. He asked, "How many people do we have in the hidden sect now?" Wu Yang said, "We have almost 3,000 practitioners. Oh, most of them are low-level practitioners. There aren't many who have reached the true master level. As for ordinary people, there are more. After so many years of development, we have about 70 to 80,000 people. I'm not sure how many there are exactly." Gucci said, "Practitioners are about the same. There are almost 100,000 ordinary people. In the past 10 years, due to the stability of life, a large number of babies were born. This is all thanks to your little sister. The medicine she made for ordinary people has saved many people." Hee hee. Lei Xingfeng nodded. No wonder the number of people has increased. Medical treatment was very important to ordinary people. He believed that Lei Xingyao's medicine, even if it couldn't bring the dead back to life, could definitely cure most people. This was the benefit of having a high-level wood element practitioner. The entire hidden sect benefited from this. Large amounts of livestock entered the mirror world, causing it to become crowded. Ever since Xianfeng took control of the mirror world, the entire mirror world had expanded. But even so, with so many people and livestock entering, the mirror world had become crowded. This was only temporary, according to the food and water stored in the base. Even if the mirror world couldn't be replenished by the outside world, the entire hidden sect could survive for at least a few years. This was enough time for the higher-ups of the hidden sect to find a suitable production base. After 10 days of hard work, all the bases were cleaned up. The people, livestock, and food were all stored in the mirror world. This was a huge project, and everyone was exhausted. Therefore, Weiyang ordered everyone to rest and not leave the mirror world. After settling everything, Lei Xingfeng went to the trading point in the fantasy sky realm to find Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng came to the trading point alone, but he did not see Xingfeng. He guessed that Xingfeng would be gone for a few more days. Lei Xingfeng found a wooden shed and sat down. Not long after he sat down, a few cultivators came. He recognized one of them. It was Du Deku, who was with Xingfeng. When Du Deku saw Lei Xingfeng, he hurriedly brought a few people over. He said, "Feng, you're here. When did you arrive?" Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "I just arrived. I saw you just as I sat down." Du Deku said, "I just happened to be trading with a few fellow cultivators. They found a lot of good stuff, so I came over to ask if you have anything you want to trade." Other than searching for materials on their own, trading was the best way for high-level cultivators to obtain materials. More often than not, they would be able to find what they needed urgently. Other than Du Deku, the others were unfamiliar. Lei Xingfeng was sure that this was the first time he had seen them. The three of them, plus Du Deku, made 4 experts. Lei Xingfeng had enough confidence now. He nodded and said, "Please take a seat." Du Deku said, "Everyone, this expert is incredible. He killed a few outsiders and has a lot of good stuff in his hands. If you want to trade, hurry up." Lei Xingfeng said, "What do you need?" "I need thunder elemental materials. I also need spatial materials." One of the cultivators said in surprise, "There may be thunder elemental materials, but spatial materials, this is too rare. I have never seen any spatial materials since I started cultivating." A fat man on the side said, "Even if you see spatial materials, you probably won't recognize them." The man nodded and said, Yes. I have never paid attention to spatial materials. Even if they appeared in front of me, I wouldn't pay attention." The fat man said, "I am a fire elemental. I want all fire elemental materials." "All right, only high-grade materials. I don't need ordinary materials." Then he said, "If there's a good crystal energy, for example, the special products of this place, stalagmites, no matter if it is normal or premium, you can take them out for trade. I want them." Lei Xingfeng was a little curious and said, "Stalagmites, premium, do you want them?" This sentence made everyone go crazy. Everyone's eyes turned red as they stared at Lei Xingfeng. The fat man said, "If you have premium stalagmites, I have everything here for trade." The power of premium stalagmites. Lei Xingfeng found it easy to get stalagmites. After the restriction was activated, stalagmites were the easiest to break. When the restriction attack slightly affected the stalagmites, they would turn into powder. Therefore, cultivators could get stalagmites, but the quantity was very small. However, stalagmites were the best crystals that could be found. They were especially suitable for the operation of seals. Top-grade stalagmite. When a seal's restriction began to grow, a top-grade stalagmite could speed up the process. Those who didn't understand restrictions would think that using a top-grade stalagmite would make a seal grow faster. Therefore, a top-grade stalagmite was a treasure. Lei Xingfeng smiled and took out a premium stalagmite. It was 8 meters tall and wrapped in a thick stone shell. It was as thick as an adult's waist. He stuck it on the ground and said, "This is a premium stalagmite. I don't think I need to peel it. Everyone will know." The fat man said, let me trade." Dudeku was anxious and said, "Hey, what are you fighting for? Of course I will go first." The other 2 cultivators were also unhappy and said, "Take out your good stuff and let him choose." They had originally planned to hide it, but now they wanted to take out their best stuff. They hoped that Lei Xingfeng would like it, and they would be able to get this rare premium stalagmite. Dudeku looked at Lei Xingfeng with a bit of resentment. That resentful expression made Lei Xingfeng tremble. He muttered in his heart, "What kind of person is he? Why didn't he take it out earlier? Now he's taking it out for everyone to fight for. Too bad." Lei Xingfeng felt that it made sense. He said, "Yes, if I think whose stuff I need the most, then this premium stalagmite will be his." Lei Xingfeng had obtained many of these premium stalagmites. Because he could enter the restriction silently and come out quietly, the stalagmites he obtained were the best ones nurtured by the restriction. They were not damaged at all. According to Lei Xingfeng, they were in good condition and were shockingly valuable. Everyone present wanted to obtain this stalagmite. Using this kind of top-grade stalagmite during advancement could achieve excellent results. It could be said that this was a treasure that every high-level cultivator desired. Everyone took out various thunder attribute treasures. They believed that only thunder attribute treasures could move Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng was instantly dazzled. They were all good stuff. Some of them made Lei Yin jump, especially the ink-colored stone that the fatty took out. There were electric arcs dancing on it. It was a foot-long, irregular stone. In fact, it could not be called a stone. Lei Xingfeng could not identify the material of this thing. This made Lei Yin very excited. In other words, the things they took out were what Lei Yin needed the most. Reaching out his hand, the black-colored stone fell into his hand. After observing it for a while, Xan Feng spoke, "I'll trade with you first. This pile of things for a stalagmite of the highest quality. There shouldn't be a problem, right?" The fatty originally planned to use 2 or 3 items to trade for a stalagmite. He did not expect Lei Xingfeng to want them all. He hesitated a little and said, "This, a premium stalagmite. All right, I'll trade." He hesitated for a moment, but when Lei Xingfeng's eyes glanced at the others, he immediately made up his mind. Lei Xingfeng smiled and put away the pile of items. There were about 6 or 7 of them, all of which were thunder attribute. The others were clearly disappointed. Lei Xingfeng said, "Don't put them away. I still want trade." A cultivator said, "You've already traded. What else can you trade with us?" Lei Xingfeng stretched out his hand, and another premium stalagmite appeared. He said this. Dudeku was stunned. He said, "How many premium stalagmites do you have? Why did you take out another one?" To be able to obtain a premium stalagmite was already extremely lucky. This guy took out another one. It was really a little scary. The remaining 3 people looked at Lei Xingfeng eagerly. They all thought that there was only one stalagmite. Who wouldn't want it? Another pile of items was traded away by Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng once again stopped them from putting away the items and took out another premium stalagmite. These people were completely dizzy. While their minds were in a mess, he quickly traded away the thunder attribute materials in their hands. A total of 3 premium stalagmites were traded for 3 piles of materials. The only one who did not trade for a stalagmite was Dudeku. His items had already been traded away by Lei Xingfeng. Where else could he find materials that could tempt Lei Xingfeng? Dudeku looked at Lei Xingfeng eagerly. Lei Xingfeng smiled and clapped his hands. He said, "All right, the trade is over." Du Deku was about to cry. He said, "A phone. Why didn't you trade with me?" The fatty glanced at his materials and said, "You have a nerve to use these to trade for premium stalagmites. Even if you used premium stalagmites to trade for these materials, it would be a big loss." Du Deku's face was slightly red. He originally wanted to fish in troubled waters. Who knew that Lei Xingfeng was very smart and did not fall for it at all? He said, I don't have anything good in my hands." The fatty said, "Who would believe you? You want good things, but are not willing to pay. This kind of thing can't be done here." Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "Deku, didn't I give you 3 stalagmites last time? Why do you want more?" Du Deku said, "There's a big difference between premium and premium. I'd rather have 1 premium stalagmite. 3 can't be compared to 1. The fatty and the other 2 cultivators despised this guy. The fatty said, "When we were trading just now, why didn't I see you take them out? 3 premium stalagmites." Du Deku said, "If you were me, would you take them out? Forget it. Don't talk big. Who would be willing to trade these things?" Lei Xingfeng said lightly, "Me. Didn't I take them out to trade?" Du Deku choked and was speechless. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "You're very strong. You can get these stalagmites, but I can't." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.